Right, I think we'll kick off. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining IAB Europe's Virtual Programmatic Day. My name is David Goddard, and I'm Double Verify's Vice President of Business Development, responsible for expanding partnerships with digital media and technology companies. I'm also the chair of IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee, a multi-stakeholder group that aims to increase the understanding of programmatic ecosystem, the impact it's having on digital advertising, and influence the industry via our initiatives. As you all will know, IAB Europe is the European level association for digital marketing and advertising ecosystem. Through its memberships of national IABs and media, technology and marketing companies, its mission is to lead political representation and promote industry collaboration across Europe. One of the ways we do this is by bringing people together through virtual events. One such initiative is IAB Europe's Virtual Programmatic Day, which I want to thank you all for joining. I also want to highlight that IAB Europe and I are very grateful to our sponsors for this event, One Trust Preference Choice, who have helped make this event possible. We can confidently say that Virtual Programmatic Day is one of the largest events in not just the programmatic industry, but the digital advertising industry. And unlike many other virtual events, it's not pre-recorded. We are live. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We will make sure we reward you with a fantastic event. So today we have a stellar lineup of moderators and panelists across 5 sessions that will discuss everything from the programmatic landscape in Europe, and if we're still on track for post-third-party cookie world, to programmatic creativity and the exciting things we have ahead for 2022 and beyond. All of the speakers you will be hearing from today are members of IAB Europe. We're very fortunate to have the very best leaders in our industry to take part in our events and join in on initiatives. If you'd like to hear more information on how to get involved in future events or on IAB Europe memberships, please contact Lauren or Marie Claire. Before we kick off, we'd love to know who is joining us from across Europe and beyond today. So please let us know what stakeholder group you belong to by taking part in our poll. And as if by magic, it's just appeared on your screen. Whilst you complete the poll, I also want to highlight that we want to encourage audience participation throughout the event. Each panel will be followed by audience quick Q&A. So if you have any questions for today's panelists, you'll be pleased to know that you can submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window during the panel. In addition to the poll you just completed, we will also be launching a couple of other audience polls to ascertain your opinion on specific topics throughout the event. So thank you in advance all for your participation in those. And thank you very much for completing the poll. I'm hoping the results are going to come in any moment. There we go. Look at that. Well, fantastic. We from those on the call right now, we have a nice spread of participation across the board. The winner is AdTech by the looks of things, publisher, very good representation, along with the buy side. Agency and advertiser, very strong too. And we also have some of those from the media and press, welcome, and other. I would love it, if possible, if you did respond as other in the chat, please do just drop in where you're from, just so we can record, because we're always intrigued by the other category as well, especially at 7%. So thank you very much for joining. I'm now delighted to say that IAB Europe has brought together a, oh, sorry, no, we're jumping into the keynote, apologies. So now for our first session, we've got a keynote presentation from Daniel Knapp, Chief Economist, IAB Europe, and myself. Yes, you can't get rid of me, on the European programmatic landscape, where we will also share results of attitudes towards programmatic survey and programmatic ad spend report. So welcome, Dr. Daniel Knapp, over to you.
David, thank you very much, and a very warm welcome to everybody. It's great to be here, and I think it's a very pivotal time to talk about the status quo and the future of programmatic. David and I are going to split this presentation. I'm going to focus on the market numbers, and David is going to focus on the attitudes, how people think about programmatic. Now, there's an abundance of choice in our industry, and sometimes we stand in front of topics paralyzed, like trying to pick the right bolognese sauce for the pasta, from supply chain transparency to post-third-party cookies to Apple's ATT to kind of a more fundamental re-engineering of the entire ecosystem through new players coming on board, it's hard to pick which topics really matter and which ones to focus on. Now, I want to keep it simple today and really look at the economic foundations of the industry and share statistics on the size of the programmatic market, how it has developed, how it splits across countries, then also an outlook into 2021 final year and 2022, plus show a little bit of a teaser on a program we're working on, which is going to affect, I think, how we look at programmatic. You all know we do an annual study on programmatic advertising, but a key question is, if we look at all the 27 countries which we include, what's the definition of programmatic? And that's hard because there are probably as many definitions as there are countries. It always varies by the local trading system, whether an industry association is skewed towards publishers, intermediaries, and so forth. The biggest difference is some countries include social in programmatic and others don't. So we provide two views of the world, one which we just call automation. There's all display and video spend, including social, that originates from an automated purchasing system, i.e. self-serve platform and so forth. Programmatic for us is something more specific. But we look at the display spend, including video, outside of the walled gardens, transacted using the open RTB protocol, regardless of the transaction mechanism. And I believe that this dual view of the world really reveals two very, very different dynamics. And it's important to look at both of these worlds, in particular, when we look at the future and the competitiveness of the so-called open internet. Now, when we look at the automation perspective, i.e. programmatic, including social, we can see that in 2020, 75% of all the spend was transacted using either some sort of self-serve platforms on social or the more narrow definition of programmatic. It was a double-digit growth despite a very tough market environment, of course, in 2020. Programmatic spend, and this is here now excluding social, so a more narrow definition. It also grew, so it wasn't just a social driver, as IO-based spend suffered decline. So we saw plus 8% growth in programmatic, and the non-programmatic bit was contracting by about 3%. So we're now in an 8 billion euro programmatic market in 2020. This is, as I'm going to show you, expected to grow double-digit in 2021, one of the fastest growth rates we've recorded in recent history. But you can see the market is, of course, 8 billion, much smaller than these 17 billion that include social. Overall, programmatic minus social is now over half of display spend, meaning that in aggregate across the European markets, which we cover, 27, programmatic is the default trading infrastructure for digital advertising. And we are, by the way, not including here out-of-home advertising, which is also increasingly becoming programmatic, but from a small basis. Remarkably, video is worth 5.2 billion of this overall programmatic 8 billion in Europe, which is peculiar and interesting because when we look at the back of the history of programmatic, starting with remnant inventory in the long tail display category, this is a very different view on the market and a vote of confidence in programmatic, as it means that more premium, more scarce inventory is being transacted programmatically. And indeed, when we look at programmatic video, the programmatic video share is actually already at 60%. For the first time, we're also covering programmatic audio in our study. Audio is a nascent format. It is just around about 500 million in 2020. But it's remarkable that as such an immature format, which has lots of organic growth, we are already seeing here that programmatic is growing around 8-9x faster than the non-programmatic bit, meaning that programmatic is, despite the small audio market, already baked in right from the start in its growth plans. And typically in other media, we've seen programmatic being bolted on at later stages when the IO-based market was more saturated. We're not seeing this currently happening in the audio space. For the first time also, we in 2020, for our 2020 study, which we released in 2021 around Mexico, we're breaking out programmatic excluding social by country. This is a first and was a major undertaking, as all countries define and also report on programmatic differently. So it required a lot of modeling on our part. The picture is quite revealing, where we can see programmatic leaders in Western Europe as the UK, the Netherlands, and Denmark. But then remarkably, we already see some of the CEE markets with a low ad spend per capita. Turkey, low ad spend per capita, but a very big market. And Serbia, also low ad spend per capita, but a very small market, being programmatic first, with over 60% of display and video ad spend being transacted programmatically. This is a picture that we didn't see around 3 years ago, where all of the CEE markets were really at the bottom of programmatic maturity. So some major shifts have happened here. But we can also see some programmatic laggards. So those markets where programmatic is below 30% of spend, for instance, where there's significant headroom for improvement. Now, we can't compare all these markets apples and apples, because the structures of the market are fundamentally different. It depends on, for instance, how strong the sell side is, what pressure the buy side is enacting on the sell side to deploy programmatic, how trading cultures have historically evolved, and so forth. So we cannot say that 76% in the UK is necessarily a benchmark that every other market should achieve, but it gives us a good view that programmatic maturity is strong across the board, and there are just a very few lagging markets. But the programmatic world, this open internet, these 8 billion are defined, is increasingly entering a more fragmented world. We're going to speak about it in this panel. I think one of the important things is that this open internet that is wedged between the Google, now the Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and other internets or walled and hedged gardens, it's not a monolithic thing. And it will become much more fragmented. There will be the anonymous web, maybe the flog web, the ID web, and so forth. So programmatic has to do a lot of things in order to ensure that it remains a scalable infrastructure. We also see, and we're going to discuss that in my Economic Trends Forum later this month, that we're seeing a move more towards one-on-one relationships and a focus increasingly not on the middle, i.e. the long programmatic supply chain, but actually on direct relationships within those applications and platforms that combine media and commerce. For instance, I think this quote here from the Triple Lift founder was very telling, and this is something that we see happening across the board, where based on changes in how targeting works, more and more companies are actually trying to launch ad networks where the purchase and the conversion measurement are actually, the ad serving and the conversion measurement and the actual conversion are actually taking one place at the same time in the same app. We can see this. We started out to map the retail media market in Europe right now, majorly driven by programmatic, which is worth already around 9 billion in Europe. You'll hear more from us about this. But I think the crucial thing is that programmatic is increasingly going to be a very important driver for this, as retailers move towards from search, on-site search, to on-site display using DSPs, as well to off-site display, where they're actually buying media on behalf of their clients. So this is bringing in net new money in the programmatic market and allows programmatic technologies and approaches to thrive in a more fragmented world as well. Lastly, on day and outlook, we see 2021 growth to be very strong, around 30% year on year for the entire digital ad market across formats. And we believe that within display and video, programmatic growth is going to be around 41%. And this is a number that is unheard of given the now maturity of the programmatic market. So we're entering a time of uncertainty, but also a time of vibrant growth. And with that, thank you. And I'm going to pass back to David.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Amazing. So we're now going to look at the factors that have contributed to the numbers presented by Daniel by reviewing our attitudes towards programmatic advertising study, which was released on October 6th this year. So it's hot off the press. In the next few slides, we wanted to share some of the top findings from the research, which looked at the benefits and challenges, the operational models and strategies for programmatic trading, the measurement of programmatic campaigns, and the future of programmatic advertising investment. Now in its 6th year, the Attitude Towards Programmatic study has become an industry benchmark to show how programmatic advertising attitudes, adoption, and strategies are evolving. The survey attracted respondents who commanded significant volumes of advertising supply and demand. The responses came from advertisers, agencies, publishers, and tech vendors from 31 markets, and are respondents with both a pan-European and global remit. Our first question to respondents, we asked them, what are the key drivers for your company to consider investing in or increasing its programmatic trading investment? Data and targeting efficiencies contributed to continue to come out on top of the main drivers for programmatic investments in 2021. From an agency perspective, we saw the largest increases in better use of data as a main driver, with 94% of agency respondents stating that it was a key driver for them to consider investing in or increasing their programmatic trading investment. This is up from 75% in 2020. For advertisers, a better use of data and targeting efficiencies were relatively evenly split, with 58% and 57% of advertisers naming these as the two main drivers. Although this has decreased since 2020, they remain the main areas of focus for the buy side in 2021. Gaining access to premium inventory at scale is also important to programmatic decision-making for advertisers. We saw a substantial growth from 20% in 2020 to 50% in 2021. For agencies, driving trading and operational efficiencies is also vital, growing from 63% in 2020 to 71% in 2021. Driving increased granular control of media and inventory was also seen as important. Looking at the sell side, for publishers, a better use of data continues to be the #1 driver for programmatic investment from the previous year. However, in 2020, trading and operational efficiencies were citing as other top reasons. In 2021, this changed to maximizing and increasing media value. The switch can be attributed to the increase in premium video, including connected TV, being made available through programmatic pipes, which advertisers and agencies are in search of and publishers want to get the highest premiums for. In 2021, the top barrier for advertisers was having a clear understanding of the impact of programmatic trading on total revenue. Across the board, hiring people with the right skill set was a key barrier too. In 2020, it was encouraging to see there'd been a significant drop in brand safety reported by advertisers and publishers. However, in 2021, this jumped back up to the top 3 concerns, a huge increase from 10 to 42% of advertisers and 9 to 31% of publishers. This higher focus on brand safety can be attributed to the increase of disinformation this past year linked to a number of events from COVID to US elections and many more, has meant that advertisers are moving their attention to tighter controls for web brand safety wherever they buy media. We now moved into the concept of in-housing, or we now move on to the concept of in-housing. Just as we thought the in-housing trend appeared to be old news with advertisers, this has jumped back up onto our radars again in 2021, with 50% of advertisers having in-house operations. Outsourced to an agency has dramatically reduced to 4%. Now it seems that the buy-side trend towards a hybrid model continues to evolve. The percentage of advertisers stating they have a hybrid model for programmatic trading has, in fact, over doubled from 16% in 2018 to 38% in 2021. When it comes to programmatic investment, the future looks bright. When asking advertisers how they see their programmatic traded online display advertising investment or revenue evolving over the next 12 months, 35% of respondents stated that they see this is increasing between 31 to 50%. That's a 25% increase from 2020, where only 10% of respondents saw it increasing by this much. Finally, it's important to look at the channels in which increased investment is going. And it's no surprise that connected TV has taken the largest slice of the programmatic pie. Almost 80% of ad tech vendors saw this as the biggest growth area in programmatic in 2021, and over 50% of all stakeholders agreed. This was closely followed by audio. I'm now delighted to say that IAB Europe has brought together a panel of industry leaders, experts from its Programmatic Trading Committee to explore the state of programmatic advertising landscape further. Our moderator for this is Lisa, RVP of Advertising Solutions from Programmatic. I'm going to hand to Lisa now, but don't forget you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We'll review your questions and put the selection to them to the panel at the end of the session. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks so much, David, as I relearn how to use Zoom right now. Always a joy to go from panelist to just a listener to being a panelist and all that stuff. So thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited about this panel. So we can just jump right in, and I will start with the first question and have the panel introduce themselves and ask them what their initial thoughts are on the stats that were presented, which stat or fact resonated the most with them. And Wayne, I'm going to start with you.
Hey, good morning, Lisa. My name is Wayne Tassie. I am lead sales director for EMEA at Double Verify. I'll tell you the stat that probably resonated with me the most is programmatic video being worth 5.2 billion in Europe. I'd say, you know, this growth trend really mirrors what we as a company, Double Verify, are measuring across the ecosystem and aligns really with marketers' needs and expectations for advanced video metrics. This really moves us, I think, you know, in the current state beyond viewability and more into the realm of attention, you know, a set of privacy-friendly tools that provide really granular insight into user presence, user engagement, and ad presentation. These metrics, you know, around attention really allow brands to optimize their campaigns, even at creative levels, you know, improving campaign performance and outcomes such as brand awareness and driving conversions.
Definitely. Thanks, Wayne, for that. Over to Alex. Thoughts on trends?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. My name is Alex McGibbon, and I run the Client Solutions team for EMEA at Xaxis. And actually, a couple of things stood out to me. Video is definitely one of them. But for me, it was that split of programmatic to non-programmatic when you compare video to everything. So I think it was Daniel just mentioned 60% of video is already programmatic, which is 10% above, or approximately 10% above the total for everything. And I think that really highlights the strength of performance that we see programmatic video bring. So I think that's a really key point. And then additionally, there was one second thing, which was that continuing strong growth of programmatic audio. And whilst it is still small, and that does mean that there's still potential for significant growth over the coming years as more and more of the traditional audio starts to embrace programmatic and starts to add to that total. And I think that's really interesting, because then if you consider the potential omni-channel executions that we can do by connecting these channels and others as they continue to grow, I think that's a really interesting and exciting part of the industry.
Yeah, definitely. Hannah, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Hannah O'Neill from Amobi, and I look after our agency partnerships across EMEA. I think for me, what stood out actually was, as well as the comments that you guys have already raised, the disparity of what's important to the advertiser versus the agency. I think although it's very understandable, I think it was quite a bigger disparity than I would have expected. The advertiser's need for premium inventory at scale has more than doubled year on year, while their cost of media has gone up, was gone down in priority, so they're willing to pay more. For agencies, this went up a little bit, but predominantly, obviously, the focus was more naturally on operational efficiencies. So I think there's a learning there for us to have an education piece on the fact that these actually can be done together and brought together in an efficient way through programmatic trading, and they don't need to be viewed separately.
Definitely agree on that. And Menno, last but not least.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Menno. I'm heading up the north part of Europe for RTL Ad Connect on digital sales. One of the things that stood out the most for me was the growth expectations for the coming period. a video growth of 40%. That's still very relevant, even if we already grew a lot. And brand safety, of course, something that we as RTL AdConnect, as broadcaster, are having it's very important to us, but it's good to see that it is important for advertisers and agencies as well.
Thanks, Menno, for that. So looking at just the overall 2021 investment drivers, we saw a number of them, such as better access to premium, increase in the value of media, increase in operational efficiencies. What would you say is the main one or most exciting investment driver for programmatic? Wayne, I'll start with you again.
Thanks, Lisa. I think, you know, if I was to quote the IAB EU Attitudes to Programmatic Advertising Report 2021 that I know, you know, IAB released in October, programmatic and publisher direct were once strongly delineated. Programmatic buys meant real-time bidding through the open exchange, and publisher direct buys meant filling out an insertion order with each publisher on the media plan. But today, private marketplaces and programmatic guaranteed deals add flexibility to buys and blur the line between programmatic and publisher directs. Now, in my experience, this flexibility is going to become even more imperative as the bandwidth of programmatic channels continues to diversify. You know, and adding to that, advertisers continue to look for far more personalized and customized solutions to reach their target audiences at scale. So I believe that investment in programmatic will continue to rise, especially on popular formats such as OTT and CTV, especially when it comes to premium non-tube video growth. So if you think about the granular controls for verification, including brand suitability standards that align with GARM and the 4AA's framework, and, you know, the return of cookieless technologies such as contextual targeting and unified 2.0 and emerging attention metrics previously mentioned, this will make, you know, investment in premium video increasingly attractive to marketers. I think brands expect constant and consistent measurement wherever they are investing, including BVOD and social and emerging platforms. So therefore, I would expect third-party verification to increase in these areas in the near future, primarily fueled by customer demand.
Thanks, Wayne, for that. Menno?
Sorry, yeah, I didn't understand the question. I lost the question for now.
Oh yeah, just more on the investment drivers. What's most exciting?
Sorry, yeah. So
Yeah.
one of the investment drivers for us is definitely CTV, like Wayne also mentioned. We see a high demand at the moment, driven by the from the US to Europe for CTV. Connected to that, our broadcaster VOD. That is one of the most important things in for video at the moment. We see that the social video part is getting a little bit smaller, especially on what mentioned before as well is the brand safety aspect of that. People want to have more grips on where and what they are showing, and more connection as well with the right audience during that specific broadcasting.
Great. Thanks so much for that. And on to the barriers. So talking about drivers and now looking at barriers. Advertisers, publishers, brand safety is back at the top for 2021. Another key barrier is adoption of programmatic trading that we saw was hiring people. I know David just mentioned that. What would you say is the main or most concerning barrier to investment? And Hannah, I will start with you.
I think I've gone with two, both the resource issue and the concern of transparency. I think they're both rather key and span more than one of the groups. I think resource is an issue, as is the lead time for retraining people from one role to another. And I think at the moment, it's very clear that all of us are looking for experts in the key emerging areas. And of course, that's going to dry up quite quickly, which I think we're seeing. So I think maybe we need to look outside of standard job roles and look at the wider disciplines and how retraining within those wider disciplines could be potentially quicker than cross-training internally. I think with regards to transparency, it links back to my last point really about how we view programmatic, old stigmas that might still exist. So it's not the place for remnant. It is a place for automation and programmatically traded investment. And we are embracing the premium inventory, and with that shortening supply chains. So we're certainly getting closer to publishers and broadcasters at Amobi, and I think with that it should alleviate some of these concerns quite considerably.
Definitely. Alex, over to you. Thoughts on barriers?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with Hannah's comments there. I would say also, though, that I don't think it's too controversial to say that issue with advertisers having a clear understanding of the impact of programmatic is absolutely essential. And I don't necessarily think that the increase in people seeing that as a barrier is unexpected, given the changes that have happened over the past year or so. From a privacy standpoint, Apple's iOS changes, obviously the ongoing cookieless discussions and how we're going to navigate those changes. It really feels like an already complex industry is getting only more so. So I think what that means is that, first of all, we have to make sure that we can show that clear and measurable impact, but additionally that we can do it in a very easy to digest way, and not just so we can highlight our positive impact overall, but also to ensure that that message on talent, that we're going to have new talent entering the industry, and it needs to be easier for them to understand why we do things the way that we do. So I think making that really clear is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So just now moving on to the overall operational models and trends that we've seen. In-housing, still the hot topic. 50% of advertisers have in-housed operations in 2021 compared to only 20 in 2020. The hybrid model is also evolving and having doubled from 16% to 38%. What would you say is driven this change, and how do you think this is going to evolve over the next 12 months? So Menno, I will start with you on this.
That's a very good question. What does it originate from? And I think that the varies per agency, per advertiser, per in-housing client. Sometimes it can be a mistrust of the situation itself, but more or less I think it's driven by the importance of programmatic media buying, the sheer growth of it, which makes it feasible for companies to actually do it themselves, and also the technology makes it possible actually to do it yourself. It's now feasible for everybody to have an Amobi, have a Google account, have a YouTube account, and actually participate in this programmatic landscape. So that's one of the most important things. I think that is knowledge and accessibility of platforms. And indeed, we have a large number of clients that do it more and more themselves on a high scale and a high level of excellence, actually.
Great, thanks so much. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you. I think I'd like to dig into that 50% stat a little bit more. That seems really, really high, especially in the time frame that it's shown. So my question would be, is this fully in-house? I think what we're seeing is a lot of hybrid or halfway in-house models, and that the client likely has access to the platforms in which they use because they want to use the technology that they're investing in. But there's very much a kind of joint ownership with the agency, and a lot of it is still agency-led. I think that the clients that do take it on in its entirety need to be significantly large for the scale of the operation that is needed to keep this evolving at the pace that it needs to.
Definitely, they are very high numbers. So I agree with you on that one, but it seems like it's a trend. Over to Alex.
Yeah, I would definitely like to look at that raw data, because whilst I think the trend is definitely that direction, the numbers are quite dramatic. But I think that for advertisers to have in-house talent with great knowledge and understanding of programmatic, that can only help everybody. It's going to help the industry grow. It's going to make it better for the industry at large. But of course, the thing that it does is it makes it more difficult for everyone to find talent. And we've already talked about that as a barrier. And that means, again, we need to renew our focus on training and attracting people to the industry. And I think, for those of us that have been in the industry for a while, we understand how complex it can be. We know that it's complicated, but we also need to remember that for people entering programmatic completely fresh, it can be really daunting to get to grips with even small parts of what we do. So ensuring that we're onboarding properly, we're training people well and in depth is essential. And I think given that this complexity and that cyclical nature of in-housing, I would probably expect more hybrid approaches in the future.
Definitely. And I do always like to plug in the IAB training, Europe's IAB training videos that they do. I think they are a wonderful tool to help train anyone who is new to the industry. Because I remember when I started, it was not that easy to understand all of the acronyms that we all love so much. So just looking at now, moving to the growth areas. So a lot of excitement around things like CTV. I know audio is a big one, out of home. In terms of future confidence in programmatic, what are your predictions for the next 12 months? So Wayne, I will start with you on this.
Thanks, Lisa. I do love a prediction question. I'll keep this short and sweet because I know that we're rounding up. I'd say for me, attention metrics and contextual targeting, because they're going to really drive forward video growth over the next 12 months. I think when we think about attention, it's really emerged as a vital yet increasingly scarce resource. So, it's important that marketers have a reliable way to measure and capitalize on, consumer attention without the need of cookies, which I know incidentally is going to be the next panel, which I'm quite looking forward to. So we'll see if they agree. Thanks so much, Wayne. Alex, over to you.
So yeah, I think in terms of predictions, it is tricky to know specifically, but I really do get a feeling that all channels are growing programmatically. I mentioned earlier on audio and video in particular, and that does give rise to this possibility of more omni-channel executions and strategies. And that, when we're working with more channels, it brings us more data. And again, when we're talking about, obviously we're losing data from cookies, but we're gaining data from contextual and other areas. So we're gaining yet more data. And again, it all comes back to that word that I've used a few times, complexity. So it's more complexity. And that's really going to require efficient ways of working. And I think this is really where artificial intelligence comes into play. And it really is its strength. It connects data. It enhances our understanding of this complexity. And using AI across channels allows us to connect this complex data with media, with creative executions. I'm really hoping and I guess predicting that we see some fantastic results from that in the coming year or so.
Great, thanks so much for that. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you. Totally agree, Alex. Couldn't agree more. For us at IAB, we are also firmly betting on the broadcast board and CTV areas, like many are right now. This has obviously been driven by the rise of consumption in the OTT platforms over and above just linear, as well as having better access to data sets to target and measure across both these channels and the rest of the buy, to Alex's point, and the omni-channel vision. So finally, we've got the foundations here in EMEA that have only been available in the US to this point. So it's very exciting. And of course, this is twinned with broadcasters being leaning in more to automation. So it's come together nicely. And also, I naturally hope that digital out of home has a good year, considering people are now out of home. So,
yes, and Menno.
Yeah, Hannah, you kind of stole my thunder there, but I couldn't agree more with you. It's best we are going to see a lot more broadcasters going into the programmatic sphere, unlocking the traditional television to OTT and bringing that to the programmatic or digital environment at least. And dipping their toes in EMEA parts of the digital spends.
Great, thanks guys. And I guess the last question to wrap this up, we know it was I'd like to say the decade of mobile. What will be the key theme for 2022? And Wayne, I will start with you.
I'm just going to call it out because everyone's saying it's CTV. I just hope, we do actually see the growth in Europe that we've been talking about for so long, because obviously, in the States, it is a big part of media investment at the moment. And we talk about it a lot in Europe, but the scale just isn't there yet, but 2022, year of CTV.
Definitely. All right, Alex, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, my theme would be video, but that would include all things CTV, etc., etc. So yeah, everything under the video umbrella. I think given the stats we've seen, given what everybody said, yeah, that's the clear theme for me.
Got it. Okay. Hannah?
I'm going to group it together in TV-led automation.
Okay.
But yes, one and the same.
Yep. I see a trend. Menno, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Yeah,
but...
indeed, it's going to be television, indeed, and CTV, BVOD. The broadcasters, those will be the main drivers of growth for video for 2022.
Definitely. All right, great. Thank you guys so much for your time. This was a great panel to host. I guess, David, do you know if we have any questions from the audience?
I don't believe we do. I'm looking in the Q&A.
Yeah, I don't see any either. So
I think you covered all the topics they ever wanted to hear about, hence no questions. So absolutely amazing. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Great.
guys.
Look, yeah, thank you all for, again, like a fantastic opening panel discussion and for sharing your insights into the European programmatic advertising landscape. Just before we move on, we'd love to get your thoughts on what you think are the biggest areas of growth for programmatic investment in a quick poll, which should be popping up on your screen now. There you go. Whilst you complete the poll, just going back to the panel discussion, I think it's certainly been a memorable 18 months with several barriers for us to still overcome. But the resilience shown by the industry, coupled with the future growth projections and drivers for programmatic investment, which the panel just shared, makes for a very exciting 2022 ahead. I haven't given you too much time to complete this panel, and I'm still going to try and stall for the results, but I believe the results are in and they're just coming up. Well, that's quite overwhelming. Connected TV, as I think nearly all the panelists flagged, where 62% is the dominant one, but it's nice to see a healthy share, and 13% of you still think it's going to be the year of mobile, which I'm proud of. So keep going with the mobile. But with regards to the future, and as we look towards the future, we can have an event without discussing everyone's favorite topic, cookies. So let's move into our next section, the post third party cookie era. This is the post third party cookie era world where our panel of experts will discuss whether we are still on track for this new era. There's been a few bumps in the road and a few shifting goalposts. So I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for this session, Andrew Hayward-Wright, Partnerships Director at CNES and Programmatic Advisor for IAB Europe. Again, don't forget to submit your questions for the panelists using the Q&A box located at the bottom of the Zoom window. And I'm now going to hand over to Andrew. Over to you, Drew.
Thanks, David. And thanks for everyone having us here today to talk about post-third party cookie and where we are we still on track? Just a quick note, Sophie unfortunately can't join us today. She does send her apologies. So it's just going to be myself, Nick, Zach, and Hilary. So as the year draws to a close with quite a lot of activity that has happened, let's take a look back and see, are we still on track? What does the future hold, and kind of what are the focuses? So Nick, I might start with you. If you can let us know a bit of your background, and also where do you think we are now, and also what are you working on?
Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, my name's Nick Welsh. I'm the programmatic lead here at Integral Ad Science across Northern Europe. And it's a big, super big question. I think the fact that Google obviously have delayed the deprecation of cookies to 2023 is a bit of insight into where we are as an industry. I think we're still kind of broadly testing alternatives. There are still some big question marks around one-to-one marketing. I think that's possibly going to go away in favor of more kind of probabilistic kind of cohorts, or even non-PII orientated advertising such as contextual. And in our case, that we're kind of building out best practices specifically around contextual, given that's an area that lends itself quite well to us, and the fact that we're very much involved in understanding context and content at the page level. Obviously, we've recently made an acquisition in CTV, which is Publica, which gives us the opportunity to start developing a multimodal view and contextual. So that's looking at audio, that's looking at frame by frame video analysis, and that's looking at obviously natural language processing and the semantics of the page.
Excellent. Yeah, and obviously very important given that there will be an element of kind of anonymous as well. So we need to make sure we focus on that. Zach, your thoughts on where we are now and also what your focus is at OneTrust?
Yeah, thanks, Hayward. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Zachary Fruke. I'm an offering manager here at OneTrust. I'm responsible for our consent and preference management products. Where are we today as opposed to 6 months ago? I think probably still in flux. There are a lot of challenges. Google don't really know what they're doing. They obviously halted Flock. They didn't test it in the EU because they weren't sure that it wasn't going to breach any GDPR or e-privacy regulations. I think the challenge is that it's a moving target. Ultimately, third-party cookies have to go away. They are incompatible with privacy, they're incompatible with trust, and they're incompatible with transparency with consumers, just as a technology. So they are going to disappear. The challenge becomes, what is the solution that then sits on top? And even just as recently as last week with the Belgian DPA, that initial ruling in regards to the TC string being personal data is going to have a massive knock-on impact to a lot of the propositions and solutions being put forward at the moment to replace third-party cookies. Because if the TC string becomes personal data, then the majority of those solutions also become personal data, and therefore the owners of them, more importantly, become joint controllers. So I think it's a real challenge ultimately at the moment, and we don't really know what the solution is going to be. From a OneTrust perspective, we're heavily investing in integrations, and that is direct integrations with the social media companies, it's integrations with all of the framework solutions being put forward at the moment. From a channel space, we are heavily investing in increasing our CTV, OTT presence as well, to make sure that we can support consent in those different channels as well. But I think, even with, as I said last week, as it puts the ball in the middle of the park again, it's, where we thought we were getting somewhere, we're potentially not anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of variables and often unexpected ones constantly coming up. And Hilary, from your perspective at DSP level, what are your focuses on and where are we now?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Just to give a context, my name's Hilary. I'm Senior Director of Business Development here at the Trade Desk. I think I picked up on a couple of things that have been mentioned by some of the panelists before, and one of the areas that I think was really important to sort of confirm is sort of the death of the cookies, or that cookies are going away, and that is inevitable. And I think as an industry, that's something that the more prepared and more aware of the fact that we're heading towards that direction, the better informed we're going to be in the way that we as a collaborative industry work towards helping the education process of what that new future looks like. So I think Zach made a really good point that it is going to go away, but there's obviously challenges around what the new norm is going to look like. And obviously, a lot of information's out there on the trade press and thinking about how the Trade Desk has positioned ourselves in terms of where we think that future is. And we've definitely, alongside a large number of other companies, feel that future lies around Unified ID 2.0. And we think at the heart of that, it's got to be around sort of learning from an upgrade on what cookies don't do so well and what the future looks like. And that future consists of putting the user at the centric, at heart of it, control being a key part of it, transparency, and then obviously the big thing here is education and helping people understand what the value exchange of the internet really is. And that's something that we're really passionate that UID solves and hopefully future-proofs us for the future.
Absolutely, yeah. I think education is key here. As us in the industry, we often forget that we're in this kind of ivory tower sort of scenario, and a lot of people don't actually understand in detail what's going on. We've all sort of mentioned and touched on, obviously, the Google decision to kind of push their deprecation of third-party cookies out, or kick the can down the road a little bit. Has this, and you each sort of touched on it, but has this announcement kind of delayed your progress? Has it shifted focus? Has it accelerated where you are now? Zach, let's start with yourself.
No, certainly not delayed in any way, shape or form. From a OneTrust perspective, what we care about is helping companies build trusted relationships with their employees, their consumers, really everyone around them. And so deprecation of third-party cookies is well overdue. There was a question in the chat, actually, I think, in regards to, is the loss of cookies the problem, or is it consent? Loss of cookies, certainly not a problem from a consumer perspective. I think that the challenge with consent is that cookies gave for consent was that the ecosystem is so complex. If you look at what consent needs to be under GDPR, it needs to be informed, it needs to be granular, it needs to be unbundled. For a general consumer coming to a website, there's no way they can understand what they're consenting to when it comes to third-party cookies in the ad tech ecosystem in such a short space of time. And so it goes back to the point that Hilary was making in regards to education. But absolutely not. Certainly not slowed us down. If anything, it's sped us up, and wherever we can start building transparency into consumer experiences, whether that's data capture, whether it's the ad tech ecosystem, whether it's marketing communications, it's imperative for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was going to touch, actually, what you were saying goes back to also what Hilary said around the user being at the center of the tool. Hilary, you mentioned obviously Unified ID 2.0. Has Google's announcement affected the delivery of that, Trade Desk, or any focus at all?
The short answer is no. And the more extended answer is actually, we've had so many more engaging conversations around this subject. And I think that the interesting thing, and I think one thing that's been talked about earlier in previous questions, is that UID has been positioned, and the key thing to get across here when we talk about the Trade Desk and UID, it's not a Trade Desk product. That's really important for everyone to be aware of that. It's an initiative that people from the ad tech industry, whether it be measurement partners, whether it be publishers, whether it be other DSPs and SSPs, are all sort of endorsing, because it is that upgrade to cookies, and it is ultimately looking at what the future looks like outside of a cookieless world. So ultimately, that sort of education piece of explaining why all of these groups of people are looking at the open internet and seeing the value that this can bring is something that actually we've had lots of conversations about, because that then leads on to bigger conversations, which are, is there going to be one identifier for the open internet as a result, and is that going to be UID2? In an ideal world, we'd love that to be the case. The reality is there's probably going to be more than one, and then it's about explaining and educating the value that identifiers play, not just from that user. And that simple example of, I go onto a website, if I'm able to go onto that website and consume free content, what is the trade-off? What is that publisher doing? How are they being able to pay their journalists? What is it that I'm prepared to trade to continue receiving that content, versus I still want to have control in the way that my data is used if I'm exchanging that? So all of those types of conversations we're continuing to have. So no, the announcement hasn't slowed that down at all.
Excellent. And Nick, from an IAS perspective, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I agree with what the other panelists have said in terms of it certainly hasn't slowed us down. Having kind of evolved from a verification company to a quality media company, context was a key component of that. And, you know, let's not forget the reason why we're in this position, right, which is the consumer experience. And I think third-party cookies, retargeting consumers over and over again with no consideration for frequency capping, concerns around how data is being used, all led to this in the first place. So yeah, we're continuing to kind of develop, and increasingly helping marketeers, offer relevant experiences for identifying users in the right environment, in the right mindset, at the right time. So that's one part. From a verification point of view, we've never relied on cookies to inform our verification products on the side of fraud or brand safety. So we've never touched the cookie. One thing I will say is that, Unified ID 2.0 is kind of clearly there's going to be a desire both on the seller and the buy side to match first party data. The challenge there is that you need a standard to be able to kind of match those 2 points, but first party data is never going to have the same scale as third party data. And I think that's where the big question mark is around the cookie, right? It's about being able to, identify those users off of your own media in order to kind of, for marketeers to be able to understand kind of performance. That's where there's still a big question mark. And what we're seeing is more marketeers leaning into, entirely privacy compliant by design solutions like contextual targeting, whilst they still have the ability to look and measure at various performance metrics, whether that be conversions or what have you, and then start to kind of build out their own intelligence on how contextual actually performs, so they're well prepared when it comes to the eventual deprecation of cookies.
Brilliant. Makes sense, and that actually leads quite nicely into the next question, because we've kind of focused on each of your current focuses and the recent announcements about Google and how they've impacted it. But if we take a look at a little bit more of a macro view, in terms of the kind of conversations that you've had within the industry, is there a sense of preparedness? Do we have solutions in place yet, or is there still more to be done? Hilary, should we start with you?
Yeah, I think when we think about are there solutions out in market, the answer is that there are solutions out in market, but I think what's important is that the due diligence on those solutions and explaining how they're not the only answer to the future of how you are going to approach this cookieless world is what we're trying to get more sort of clarity when we're talking to our partners, whether it be advertisers directly or to agencies. And I think it picks up on something that Nick mentioned in terms of UID and some of the challenges, or any identifying some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that contextual will play, how it will play a role. And I think that's the key thing, is actually not sort of looking at racing towards one as the solution, because absolutely conversations around the use of first party data is going to be imperative, and we've had lots of conversation with brands about that. But there are some brands out there where first party data they don't have the means to be able to facilitate that. If you think about FMCG brands and thinking about your own purchasing habits and whether you're going to be prepared to give your data over to a brand that potentially, for example, for a toilet roll, is there a natural trade-off in that? So are you collecting that first party data to be able to do that? But actually the power of contextual strategies, as well as other ways that the replacement of third party cookies and being able to look at potentially reaching now measurable in terms of acquiring new business as well as retaining business. All of this is a combination of things that absolutely we're having those conversations about. So I don't think there are opportunities out there. There is testing going out, but I think this is the key point for people to do that. This is the perfect time to have those conversations, to explore and to test the solutions that are out in market.
Excellent. And Nick, you sort of touched on it before, but what's the sense of that you get in terms of the wider market?
So the sense I get in terms of the wider market, if I could look at it like chronologically, at first it was panic and some concern that people had got comfortable with using cookies to kind of target and also comfortable with those kind of attribution metrics that the cookie lends itself to. and we're perhaps, you know, looking at contextual again, we're perhaps looking at contextuals, but this is something that's always been done. It's not sexy, it's not new. But actually, what we're seeing now is kind of traders and marketeers are being forced to kind of look at contextual through a new lens, but not look at other targeting or privacy by design compliant targeting methods through a new lens, and starting to kind of look at performance. I mean, contextual hasn't always been seen as a way of, you know, targeting at the bottom of the funnel, but actually we're releasing some case studies imminently. But what we are seeing is that actually it's much more cost effective to go down the contextual route, and actually it's delivering, it's going beyond the CPA goals of some traditional audience-based segments. So this kind of epoch that we're going through when it comes to digital marketing is actually forcing us to kind of look at a new set of behaviors that puts the consumer at the center, and actually it's challenging our kind of, I guess, preconceptions over what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's a good thing. It's going to be like change is always quite painful, but through change comes growth. And I think, you know, to Hillary's point and to Zach's point, it's going to be bumpy. There's not going to be one solution that fixes absolutely everything, but it is forcing us to kind of develop a new set of behaviors, learn, and hopefully, you know, create a much more, create an open web where the consumer is, you know, plays an important role and you know, feels like there's a decent value exchange.
Absolutely, makes sense. So almost a shift back to focusing on ROI, and interesting. I think one of the panelists in the previous panel, Wayne, asked around the intention metrics. It sounds like that is something that's going to be a bit of focus. Zach, your thoughts on the wider market?
Completely agree with both Hillary and Nick there in regards to testing. I mean, the sheer fact that Google did push the date back and postpone it shows the cliff edge that will happen when it happens. So imperative for brands to be trying out different things today so that they're ready before that happens. I think, you know, part of it is trying to bite size up and chunk up the different impacts that they're going to see. So if we think about you know, consumers and retargeting, then obviously at the moment the ad tech ecosystem is fantastic for visitors to an advertiser's website. They then go to a publisher's website and the advertiser is able to show an ad to that individual. So how we retarget those people that have already come to our website. But then there may also be the use case where we're trying to target a demographic or a subset of people that have never been onto our website, and so we're trying to do that. And I think it's about chunking it down and not looking for a single solution to do all of these different things for you and coming up with different strategies. I mean, certainly retargeting in the first case, the example I always give was that I unfortunately decided to try and propose during COVID when retail was shut. But how do you go about getting an engagement ring without your girlfriend or your partner being spammed with adverts because you're online looking for engagement rings? And so there's loads of cool strategies you can think about when you take that problem just in itself and you say, well, actually, why don't we just ask the person that comes to our website, are you looking for an engagement ring or are you looking for a surprise gift? If they say yes, your secret's safe with us, but what we would like to do is send you discounts. Give us your email address. Can you imagine the marketable universe database for the jewelers that does that first? So I think there are lots of different strategies you can take that you need to be trying today, but it is about breaking it down into different bite-sized pieces rather than trying to solve for third-party cookies and all of their use cases in one fell swoop.
Brilliant. I love the use case. I had a similar scenario, but the ads helped me figure out what she liked. So there was a
fantastic. Yeah.
So moving on, I think we sort of loosely touched on the opportunities, but let's dive into what do we think the opportunities and the potential threats are as we move forward, and are there past learnings that we should be mindful of going into this? Nick, let's start with you. Oh, did I break up?
I'm really sorry, Andrew. I have to ask you to repeat that.
Repeat the question. No worries. That's all right. So the question was around, so we see, what are the opportunities and threats as we move on into 2022? And are there past learnings that we should be mindful of as well?
Yeah, so I think the opportunities definitely are around, creating to create new engagement and performance metrics that go beyond cookies and clicks, right? So I think everyone has debated whether or not the click was a decent measure of attribution. I would say most people, if you asked them, doubted whether or not that was actually a valid way of monitoring performance. But everyone's used to it, everyone does it, so they'll continue to do it. Now, I think the opportunity is that we move away from that and we start gathering together other data. So kind of viewability, you touched on attention, time in view, married with context, married with other signals might lend itself better to determining and then obviously looking at ROI, right? Real ROI, especially when we're looking at businesses that are online specifically and are looking to sell products directly to consumers. It's kind of measuring actually the return on the sale. I think that's hugely important. The threat is still that we've got a poor handle on the customer experience. I think what was mentioned earlier is, I believe Zach brought this point up, is the, unfortunately, frequency capping is, how do you solve for that? How do you solve for that when you don't have a cookie that follows that follows the user across the web? That's going to be particularly difficult. And I think also the fact that we've got we are encouraging and saying that there's going to be more than one solution, right? It's not just contextual, it's not just unified ID, but with multiple solutions, fragmented solutions, that could lead to a lack of standards. And we know what that was like from, you asked what's historically, have we got anything to learn from? Well, look at viewability, right? When viewability was a thing, everyone was developing their own kind of standards for viewability until the MRC got involved and set their own standard, which everyone broadly aligned to. Viewability was meaningless because everyone had their own specific standard for viewability. And there is a risk that performance might go down the same route.
Absolutely. Zach, what are your thoughts?
I think undoubtedly the biggest opportunity here is to improve the customer experience. I mean, that is the ultimate full stop on it, because as of today, we're in a world where the digital ecosystem, all of us, when we're online, we're treated as a number, not as a human being, not as a person on the other side of that computer. We are just a number that is feeding into different types of KPIs. That's not the experience that you see or feel when you go into a bricks and mortar store. There's not a lawyer waiting for you to sign a disclosure before you even enter the store. There isn't a private eye following you to each and every store afterwards to find out where you live so that they can direct mail you. So I think there's an opportunity to right the ship of the digital ecosystem that has ultimately got out of hand. And I think the awareness from a consumer perspective is driving much of this rather than regulations themselves. Things like the social dilemma on Netflix. For the Gen Zs, this is what they're growing up with. They're understanding that knowledge, the digital footprint, how important their data is. So I think the real opportunity is there for all of the consumers. And it's, for businesses to work out how they can continue to advertise, continue to acquire new customers and users, but do that in a way that doesn't remove any rights from the consumers themselves.
Excellent. And Hilary, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the guys have covered it off really well and made some really good points. I think to add maybe something slightly different, but along the same vein, is thinking about sort of the opportunity for an upgrade going forward and how that upgrade impacts across all channels. In the previous panel, at the end, they asked sort of what are your sort of key thoughts for 2022? What are going to be the drivers? And we did that poll and we saw CTV and mobile come up as top. And interestingly enough, both those channels don't use cookies. So if we're thinking about that thinking about what that new future could look like and what the opportunity is, we've got a real opportunity to have an identifier that truly is omnichannel, that gives us an opportunity to actually, when we're talking about frequency capping, when we're talking about measurement and being able to sort of think about the way that brands and marketeers think about the way that their campaigns have moved and affected the outcome that they're looking for. There's a potential to have a new identifier that's up to date, but has at its heart got privacy in it that delivers against those things. So I think the opportunity there is great. In terms of the threats, we did a little bit of our own sort of research, and we found that actually 79% of UK adults were actually concerned about the collection of their data and what it's being used for. So trust is a big thing, right? So that is a big threat. Any solution that goes out to market, if it doesn't deliver on that trust aspect and that users understand, then it's not going to work properly. So I say all of that in the sense that people still want to be able to have seamless experiences, have relevant ads served to them, but we've got to strike that balance between personalization and privacy.
Excellent. Yeah, trust is paramount for everything that we're doing right now. Given time, we've got a few questions from the audience. I do love an audience question, so we might flip over to those. So the first one that we've got is, what do the panel believe will be the main, oh, just lost it, 1 second. What do the panel believe will be the main source of data or data sources in the future, and what level of quality, deterministic rather than scraped secondhand data would they desire? Zach, should we start with you?
For me, I think it's going to be first and second party data. So either data that you're capturing yourselves directly from your consumers and users, or data that you're getting directly from a second party, but that they captured themselves direct. Data sharing is still an incredibly important part of the customer experience. If we don't do data sharing, then it's detrimental to consumers. If you think about purchasing a car, why can't I click a button and my details get transferred over to insurance broker? Because I can't drive it off the forecourt unless I've got insurance. But right now I need to fill in all my details with the dealership or the brand, the car manufacturer, and then all of my details again with a secondary company. So I think, data sharing is incredibly important and increasingly more important for the consumer experience. But it's just, how do we capture that data and ensure that we can pass that on to second parties in a way that's transparent.
Excellent. And Hilary, what are your thoughts on the sort of main data sources in the future?
Yeah, I think it's linked to one of the questions we had before, and the answers around first-party data and that being a key part. I also think first-party data owners, so retailers, is going to be huge, just because of the way that they have the opportunity to look at transaction data, off-site data, and how that impacts brands' actual purchases and the funnel sort of stuff, and the stuff funnel sort of ways of measurement. So I would say definitely first-party data, and those data owners such as retailers are going to play a big part in terms of the types of data that's going to be very useful in the future.
Excellent. And Nick, your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I know the questions around what level of quality deterministic data rather than scraped. I don't think it's going to be about deterministic data. I really don't. I think there is, in order to have a scaled, in order to deliver marketeers the scale that they need to identify new audiences, there is going to have to be an element of probabilistic data. So I agree with what Hilary and Zach said. First party data is clearly going to play a key role, but is there enough of it? Outside of the walled gardens, is there enough of it? And are you able to match it to your media partners? And do the media partners have enough of it? And yes, completely agree with Hilary. Big retailers who have access to a ton of data, and whether they can kind of start to use that in-store data to create kind of new interesting segments, that is one thing. But I do think we'll start to, I hate to say it, but panel data at scale, and how that panel data might be married to contextual data. So let's think about kind of Ipsos collecting data about key demographics, And let's say that certain key demographics like football might over-index against men. Well, okay, well let's then look at how do we marry that panel data at scale with contextual environments to almost deliver kind of an audience proxy segment. It is probabilistic, yes, but I think we're going to see more behavior like that. And Google are going to be spending more time on on their cohorts and flock, and how does kind of an aggregated view of audience behavior within the browser, how do we collect that in a safe way to deliver really smart probabilistic data? I think it's a combination of the two. I don't think deterministic data on its own is going to be enough.
Makes sense, absolutely. We've got some more questions coming in. I think given time, we might not be able to get to them. What we'll do is, as we always like to get a prediction at the end of these. So for the next 12 months, what are each of your predictions? How is the industry going to progress? Nick, let's just start with you.
There's another delay.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there isn't, right? But my prediction is, I want to err on the side of optimism, right? And what I hope to see is, the consumer playing an active role, right? And that we're actually giving the consumer what they want, and the internet and the way that we monetize the internet changes for the better. I think the future is bright. I think we're going to see a lot of businesses start to lean in, and actually Europe's going to play an integral role in how we develop new opportunities, for marketers and for publishers.
Excellent. And Zach, your thoughts?
I think it's an opportunity, and I think the industry generally is going this way. We certainly see the big tech companies doing this, starting to think about the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. Whenever you try and just borderline the letter of the law, you always come unstuck, because a new law comes out, or someone else makes a different decision, or a new precedent is made. So I think the opportunity in the next year is to start thinking about the spirit of the law, and think about solutions that will be able to last in the future, not just last for 6 months until the privacy regulation comes out or until the next law comes out.
Makes sense. And Hilary, to round us off, what are your thoughts, prediction for the next 12 months?
I'm excited. I think the next 12 months we're going to see a up-leveling of information when it comes to the understanding of what new technologies are going to be able to offer going forward. And I think an up-leveling of people's understanding of the use of the internet and the value exchange. And I think that's really exciting. I think we talk about, the origins of the death of the cookie, but actually the re-education and the support of putting privacy at the first, and also control back in users' hands, but also giving them that framework of understanding how the internet works. So I think that's really exciting, and I think it's an opportunity for us to really push that message. And I think that message will drive the right solution to market, because it will put the user at the heart of it.
Excellent. There you have it. So we've touched on there's a need for education. Trust is paramount. The user has to be center, and there's potential needs for standards, and test and learn. Don't rush into something, but the future seems positive. Thank you, Zach, Nick, and Hilary, so much for your time. Really engaging. I'm sure we could have carried on talking about this for much more time, but really appreciate your time today. I'll hand back to David. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew, and panelists. Another great discussion. Richard, takeaways. In fact, here there is hope, and we're all heading in the right direction when it comes to post-third-party cookie world. Before we move on, we'd love to get your thoughts on how prepared your company feels you are for the post-third-party cookie era with another poll. We're throwing polls at you everywhere here. So on the screen is the question. Whilst you complete the poll, I just wanted to go back to the panel discussion. I think it's very clear that as we approach this new post-third-party cookie era, we have to keep talking and working together as an industry, and it will all be about testing, learning, adapting. At IAB Europe, it's a core focus of our work plan and has been over the past couple of years. And we're currently working on a further update to the post third-party cookie era guide that was originally created in June 2020 and updated again in February this year. Within the update, we share the status on the latest industry and corporate solutions and an up-to-date outlook from where the industry is today. The current guide, which is still a fantastic read, despite us planning to update due to all this change, can be found at IAB Europe's Knowledge Hub and will be shared also in the chat, I'm sure. So please go take a look at the guide after today's Virtual Programmatic Day. We also have a dedicated post third-party cookie task force that meets bi-weekly. So if you'd like to join, please do get in touch. The results, I believe, are in, yes, on the screen. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, 5 being extremely, how prepared is your company for the post third-party cookie era? We have a really interesting result. It's quite split. A third, almost a third at 3, so the middle ground. Some almost a third at 4, which is brilliant. Some 17% at extremely prepared. We'd love to learn off you, maybe join a task force and share with us how we all can get to your stage. And a couple of others at 5 and 17, and maybe for those, recommend reading the guide, which is probably in the chat box or on IAB Europe's Knowledge Hub. So thank you so much for that. Now let's move on to our next panel, which further explores the topics of cookies. We'll focus on how the TCF, Transparency Consent Framework, will work in this new world. To lead this panel, I'd like to welcome Thomas, VP of Publishing, Central Europe, and Head of External Relations for EMEA at Xandr. Again, I'd like to everyone, thank you again for all those questions in the last panel. Please, again, submit your questions for the panelists in the Q&A box. But for now, I will hand over to you, Thomas.
Thanks, David. I'm very happy to welcome this wonderful panel with Fiona and Chuck and also Elena. And now we have 30 minutes to talk not only about what is how does the future looks like without cookies, but also what does it mean for the TCF in general. So because we have just heard that the industry, everyone prepares for a world without third-party cookies. We all know it's coming. We all know it's there in some formats like in-app and CTV. But we would like to then now explore what does that mean for the TCF. So I'm heading up the steering group at the IAB Europe for the TCF activities, and I received questions like, well, if the cookie is going to be deprecated, then will the TCF also going to be deprecated? Because I mean, it's all based on cookies, right? And we were thinking about this, then for sure not. And we want to elaborate in the last 30 minutes why it might be even more important to dig into the TCF and what this means. So first, I will hand over to Fiona then for your first thought. How do you see that the TCF is going to work then once the cookies have been deprecated? That's an interesting question, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Thomas. When you look at what a cookie is under GDPR, it's personal data. And any IDs that replace that and relate to an individual and being able to identify in combination with other data an individual is actually still personal data. So the GDPR still applies. Also, in Europe, the e-privacy directive still also applies, because to the extent that any of these IDs, whether they're deterministic, probabilistic, cohort IDs, if they're being placed on or a user's device is being accessed for this purpose, then the e-privacy directive will apply. So we still have a need for a way for gathering consent in accordance with the e-privacy directive for accessing devices, and also for further use of that personal data for further processing on a granular basis for purposes. So it's really just going to continue to be providing the same level of value that it's already providing, to be able to transmit those signals and to be able to provide at the front end at the publisher site or the advertiser site, depending on where the user is interacting, that ability to provide those disclosures through consent management platforms to the user, and then the ability to be able to transmit those signals through the ecosystem.
That's very interesting. Thanks for the great introduction. So Elena, over to you. Does the TCF then represent the basis that the industry can build on? How is your opinion and the opinion of Adform?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of TCF for one main reason. It has established where its main purpose was to transmit and to communicate a consent signal and in general user choices across the ecosystem, in particular in the downstream. So, and such framework has been embraced with, I mean, quite successful among publishers, and then I think slowly also we're seeing a very good uptake also among advertisers. But the like when we look at the main difference between third-party cookies and first-party IDs, you know, replacing the third-party cookies, I think it is TCF is not having a, you know, like a less important role. On the contrary, it will play the, you know, like maybe an even a more important role, because the role of the parties will change from a GDPR perspective. Who is a controller, who is a processor, who potentially is going to be a joint controller, maybe both of the parties between where the data is shared. And then that is why it is even more important for the users to get transparency as who are the players with whom, you know, like a publisher or an advertiser is going to share, you know, like its data with. And second, it is important for those who receive that data to establish privacy compliance within the ecosystem and be able to recalibrate, adjust framework speed, you know, moving from a DPA to a joint control agreement potentially. I guess, or hopefully the conversation will touch upon those points a little bit later in this panel. But TCF will remain, and it shall be kept as an important framework that ensures transparency and trust within the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. So what I hear is that the TCF is flexible enough in terms of technology to support different use cases, even if there are some changing opinions and regulations. The TCF is flexible enough to adopt, right?
Well, I think Fiona has mentioned one underlying concept. So she was saying, she was calling out upon the type of IDs, right? And then if it's first party or if it's third party, it's still personal data, and then compliance with the GDPR and your privacy has to be established. And through the TCF, we're going to see, and the R2B protocol, we're going to see, you know, like first party IDs replacing the third parties. And that is why it doesn't make any difference if it's first party or third party, you know, compliance with the GDPR still has to be established. And TCF, it's there to, you know, to transmit those signals across, like in a standardized way across the ecosystem. So it is flexible. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for elaborating on that. I mean, within the IAB Europe, as I think David mentioned, there's a new working group that exactly works on the harmonization of the TCF with all of the different identity solutions. The differentiation is between like deterministic, then which is where there is an ID. There's like a login, like a registration, like a common ID. Unified ID is one of those, and that ID the other one. There's also probabilistic solution, but still there's a need to be GDPR compliant, even if only using other information. There's a Google Sandbox specific and also non-ID solution. So the question is now to Jacques. Now you're from the buy side. The question is, what does the advertiser really care about which solution it will be? So what's the interest, and how do you see it from a more, I would say, practical point of view?
Hi, I'm Jacques. I work for Starcom UK, Programmatic Group Director. Yeah, so how does ID solutions, you know, TCF and ID solutions, how do they all translate, and what are clients thinking? Well, you know, we can't just say, okay, the TCF is more about just making sure we're compliant with the law, and then, you know, we've got consent and we get the right signals or the right data from our consumers and then link them to a UID and then pat ourselves on the back and say, congratulations, job done. We've replaced the cookie, we can all go home. It's absolutely not. If you take that kind of approach, you've gone completely wrong. A few of the previous panels have alluded to a lot of the challenges and to some of the thinking and talking about the fragmentation. And ultimately, what it really boils down to is that we need to look at how we use this data. We can't go and carry on saying we're going to take data for targeting. We need to evolve that data to data for insights. Now, I can back up that position quite strongly in the sense that if you look at how the CPM on Safari versus Chrome has evolved, the current research will show you that you are paying anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times the amount on a Chrome browser as opposed to a Safari browser because of the bit density, because of our inherent love of data, right? This idea of one-to-one. We need to kind of separate that, right? There is going to be a breaking point. So we need to then also look at things like what's happening with limited ad tracking and Apple tracking transparency on the app side. Globally, there's only a 21% uptake saying yes. In the next 2-3 years' time, you know, even with TCF as a framework and multiple UID solutions, even if we come up with a standard and we say, right, we've connected them all beautifully, you are only going to have an internet of about 5 to 20% of authenticated users. Now, at the moment, it's about 60%, but if that number keeps going down, the cost will keep going up. So we need to start saying to ourselves, no, let's look at data for insights. So look at that small amount of users that you can using your first party data. So looking at the things that they love, what makes those people tick? What makes them say, you know what, I love this brand because of that. This is my trusted news source. These are the kind of things that make me excited and get me out of bed in the morning. Use that information to then broadly target without using data, just saying the data informed my media planning, informed the way I think about the world, and then deliver your media within partnerships with that fit the brief. And as you do that, you will then actually find that that kind of approach further respects this privacy by design. So whilst yes, there's a lot of interest in all the different users and there's a lot of work still need to be done and advertisers are trying to navigate through all of this, there's still a fair amount to go as we, you know, build on our CDPs and understand how TCF links to all the UIDs. But they ultimately need to change from data for targeting to data for insights.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting approach and information. Thanks, Jacques, for that. So Fiona, question: how will this approach, like data for insights, then also work in a DSP, work for MediaMath? Because I mean, and how would you say it can be harmonized then with the TCF? Because there will be maybe the need for some for the usage of some personal data in this context, right?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point that Jacques raised here about working with the information that we have through the targeting capabilities now, and then building out further modeling for being able to create insights. And certainly MediaMath has that in its brain optimization. We are building for that. So we have a pathway towards solutions by using all the different types of identifiers. The TCF is really important in that for Europe as well, so that we can actually make sure that we're gathering these insights in a way for our clients that can be supported in a lawful way, and continue to do that in this post third-party cookie environment.
Thanks. Elena, do you also want to add to that from an ad form perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've touched upon, Thomas, like what is the view of the advertisers, right? And how do they, and mention upon the concept of deterministic IDs and how does that look like? And for us, what we see, what we notice internally when we speak with our clients, that is most of like the brands on the brand side, is that the advertisers, they don't understand exactly yet how to reach out to those audiences, replacing the third-party ones with the first-party. They start to enter into a panic mode and lack understanding, but also awareness as to what extent do the existing ID solutions that are employed, by third parties or exist on the market, and how do they fit in within their audience building capabilities, and also make sure that they do not lose the audience that they have accumulated so far. And I think so there are like some advertisers, they're very advanced actually, but there is like that is the minority of them, and we try to educate the advertisers to look into, to focus on exploring the identity solutions that exist at this point. And with the carve out that we at Adform, we accommodate all of different types of IDs that currently exist within the ecosystem, and be it deterministic type of IDs or be probabilistic. We don't know yet how the privacy sandbox at Google is going to work. Primarily, I think there's going to be only like within the Chrome's browsing, but all in one, we do encourage advertisers to elaborate and to engage in-house counseling and privacy counsel to evaluate the identity solutions that exist out there, and then be it to go on one-on-one with discussions with vendors such as we do, and we have initiatives and have certain working groups internally where we then explore those kind of questions. We've put together FAQs, which we will hand over to the clients that elaborate on the topics of how does the privacy framework look like for advertisers in the context of moving and transacting on first-party IDs only.
Yeah, just going back a little bit from first-party IDs to common IDs, which is industry IDs, before we enter a new subject. So Fiona, one question that I read recently that about 100 different ID solutions in the US, for example. So, I mean, how many of those will be relevant? How many of those will survive? And how will the industry, how can the industry scale if it's so super fragmented? I mean, sorry for this very complex question, but just before we leave the field of common ID, I wanted to raise that.
That is a big question. I personally wasn't aware that there were that many common IDs. And I think probably it's actually going to come out in the wash, like what key industry players are supporting what solutions. And I'm not sure that 100 IDs would survive, because it's like the operational challenges of that start to become difficult to scale. So I think coalescence around a few common IDs would be important for scalability in the industry.
Yeah, I really like the sharpness of your questions, to the point. That's great. So they're not going to survive all of them. That's good to know. But the question is then also, how would you as an advertiser then focus on which one to choose if you don't know that the publisher is going to support this? So this is like a chicken and egg, who goes first and where does the scale come from? We come to that question a little bit later, maybe, about what the advertiser and publisher then they need to do. But before we go into this direction, there's a new service layer within the TCF. It's called the CMPs. So the CMPs that collect the consent of the user and then store it. So I mean, we also read about first publisher ID and how this all comes together. A question to Elena now: if you think about it, like authentication, is this something that publisher should go in this direction, then to create a persistent first-party ID? And then later on, the second part of the question, Jacques, we come to you, thinking about how the advertiser then also is able to reach those first-party IDs. But for is this authentication of consent, like a registered consent? Is this the way that you see the market is going?
I think the market, I think it's still difficult to predict, the volume of or the decision and basically what exactly is going to publisher decide for, and then the volume of that decision and how does that resonate on the advertiser side. What we notice is that, for example, publishers that focus on deterministic type of IDs, for example, I think they provide a high level of accuracy, for example, but they, on the other side, we see potentially the downside of deterministic IDs is that they're not as scalable as other type of IDs. And I do see also, however, on the advertiser side, those brands that have already a very robust user database to go for deterministic IDs, because deterministic IDs, as we know, for example, NetID, they are linked to an email address, right? And I do foresee those brands going for that kind of identity solution, so that when they meet, when the brand meets, the publisher where their campaigns are going to be published, there is a accurate matching rate, and therefore the deterministic, type of IDs are going to be embraced, on those kind of instances. On the other side, I think the CMP will still be a core and an essential function that will play within learning brands, but also publishers learning about their audiences, about the users that are visiting their pages, and how to target, whom to target, because you have to link the audience that you've built within the CRM with the audience that you see that is visiting your sites. And that can be done, through either you have the same type of IDs that you deploy, or there is certain inferences that you build through machine learning that would connect the dots between A and B. And authenticated consent, I think I would be cautious to give some prediction on that front. But what I would like to think is that, or what we also see on advertiser side, is many advertisers are starting to populate their first-party ID data silos by deploying first-party ID tracking, first-party cookies on their sites. Before they decide which ID solution they're going to use, they need to also build up a database of first-party IDs. So this is what we've witnessed so far.
Perfect. Before we go to Jacques, Fiona, your ideas and your suggestions against consent fatigue and authenticated consent, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think consent fatigue is definitely a challenge. It's been raised in the UK and in the government, talking about challenges to wanting to make the pathway for the user interaction to be smoother. So I think one of the challenges for CMPs and working in with the transparency and consent framework as they start to develop post third-party cookies is to, first of all, provide some sort of further education to users, which may be more than language disclosures. I mean, I'm a real fan of visuals and diagrams or videos to be able to help people understand, because part of the fatigue is reading legalese and language and trying to understand the definitions. So to the extent that we can educate the broader community more about the value exchange in a way that's digestible, then the real meaningful consent or legitimate interest understanding and objection to that has a real understanding in the broader community. And so, and I think this is built into the transparency and consent framework plan as well. The more we educate the consumers, the more there's going to be an understanding, the broader that is. But, people have different learning pathways. So we need to have a multiple layered approach to this. And that's not just multiple layers on privacy policy disclosures, but animation, videos, communication, all the talking that people are doing. The news articles that come up that are brought up in a way of concern about privacy and cookies have been really helpful to the industry, in my opinion, because it's helped to create some impetus for the industry to refine and define the processes and the way that we're interacting. And the value to society is so huge on targeted advertising and reaching the audience and pulling together the advertisers and the publishers and supporting content, that there has to be a way forward. So I see all of these challenges as being challenges to create optimism to a path forward for a really flourishing digital economy globally.
That's a very, very good outlook. So I see the flowers of the digital area growing, which is great. And I recently joined a panel where they were discussing about a Nutri-score, like an ABC, how data sensitive it can be to make it easier for users to understand what's the actual choice is. So Jacques, over to you. I mean, we talked a lot about activation. So there is first-party data from a publisher, first-party data from an advertiser. and how to connect those tissues. And there's both of them, they need like a legal basis. That's clear. That's what the TCF can also do. But how then to activate those? So there's this concept of the new thing of the clean rooms, or how does this work with the CDP? So maybe you can elaborate on that, how you see this coming.
Yeah, clean rooms are one of those things that are coming to the forefront quite rapidly now. I think COVID did slow a few advertisers down as they kind of went from trying to fix data to trying to fix survival. But now, good to see everyone's back in investing and looking at this problem head on. And while some are still going, right, I need a CDP, I need to work out my ID solutions, I need to work out kind of how do I collect my data. And it's also on the publisher side. We're seeing more and more publishers putting up, you have to log in to do the content. And that's good to see. They're testing and trying different methodologies so that when we do get to a point of, okay, now we need to enact on all of this, it's not going to be a big shock to the system. So it's very, very encouraging to see everyone getting involved in this process. And when it comes to clean rooms, I personally love them. I think they are a wonderful solution because without intending to, they solve many, many problems. One of the biggest challenges that we have in an industry is the way that we collaborate, right? We've always had this conversation about, if I spend $1, where did it actually go? Or, in the TCF framework, okay, well, have I got legitimate consent? Am I acting in an ethical and a moral way? Now, having a clean room is brilliant because it says, right, I need to collaborate. So I can take my CDP data, my first party data, stick it in a clean room, but then I have to go have a conversation with someone else. I have to go say to them, hey, I've got this clean room. Can we work together? And as a result, the number of parties getting involved gets cut down very, very quickly. And that's brilliant because then more money ends up going to quality media, which you've now, if you move away from data for targeting into data for insights, you're only going to work with people that align with your insights. So you ultimately end up funding better media. You end up funding more quality media. And I think for us as an industry, that is crucial. That is the bottom line, right? So we need to make sure that we're looking after both the supply and the buy side. And clean rooms sort your SBO, they sort your data compliance problems. So that it does a multitude of things without ever, I think, really thinking that it was ever going to do that much, but it actually does. And it's a fantastic, fantastic way to do it. And I encourage everyone, as soon as you've worked out what CDP is and how CMPs feed into that and how you align your internal business structures, start thinking about clean rooms, start thinking about partnerships, make sure that you're talking to the publishers and get all the right people in the room.
Wow, that's like a motivation speech for collaboration, which is great. And for CDPs, it's important, and also for the clean rooms that both ends use the same identifier. So this is like the essential still that both need to have an ID, both need to be collected and with all based on all the different requirements of the GDPR and privacy. So it's like the end, the final stage of how an industry can collaborate. We only have 1 or 2 minutes left. Anyone else wants to say something about clean rooms before we go to the last round of questions?
I actually wanted to quickly add something because clean rooms is one of the big topics we we have discussions with publishers and advertisers, and then as Jack was saying, we do that kind of collaboration internally. So we do take publishers and we do take advertisers, and then we put them in the same room to discuss and elaborate on the concept of clean rooms, and to make sure that the clean room of the advertiser and the clean room of the publisher does not, they do not commingle the data they put in. That is why, so the concept itself of a clean room is as self-explanatory as it is, and that data is not, is kept separate, and then only the results that are coming out. And this is the biggest debate. What are the roles of the party on the results, and then what is the role of the vendors that that receive those results. But that is, I think it's a topic for a different panel.
So cool. So we're at the end of a panel. There's one question I'm going to ask at the end, but first, 30 seconds to answer to each of you a different question. So we're going to make it a little bit more interesting than just the same question. So to you, Elena, 30 seconds answer. Which of the solutions like deterministic, probabilistic, sandbox APIs, and ID-less like contextual will be the most important one to focus in the next years?
Yeah, I mean, which one is the most important to focus on? I think it will be naive for me to call out upon one of them, because there is still so much uncertainty on the privacy sandbox, how exactly that is going to play a role within the ecosystem outside of the Chrome browser. Then second, with respect to deterministic, as I mentioned, it provides a high level of accuracy and one-on-one identification, but at the same time, it also we see that it can potentially have a lower scale. And on the probabilistic type of IDs, I mean, they do work on most of the browsers. Same for deterministic IDs, but and then they have like much more scalability potential, but they have less accuracy, contrary to the deterministic. All in one, I still think it's first-party IDs are the holy grail within the ad tech space and running targeted advertisement. And essential will it be for publishers and advertisers, I think, to make up their mind on what kind of IDs they're going to populate their first-party data silos, and then based on that, we will see for sure. We'll see, at least this is my expectation. We'll see for sure certain type of IDs and a fair good split among deterministic, probabilistic, and then the chunk that will go through the privacy sandbox.
Okay, my summary, all of the four, which is great. Fiona, the question to you: the global privacy platform gained traction. Is this? Do we get? Does this initiative get enough support? Also, short answer.
Completely. Everybody should be leaning into this initiative, the Global Privacy Platform, and which has been led by IAB Tech Lab, and the cross-jurisdiction privacy program, which is, I'm not sure if I named that correctly, but by IAB Legal Affairs. Together, they're leaning into the global challenges. So they're adopting the IAB EU TCF, the IAB CCPA framework. Canada's on board with that now. They've already been working on, they've made a lot of progress on this. They're starting to look at Brazil. I think, this is really where I think the future is, to be able to help the challenges of operational compliance, technical compliance for a company.
Thanks, Fiona. I just paid €50 to David that we have 2 additional minutes. So 30 seconds for you, Jacques, I ask you a different question. What would be the wish of an advertiser in the privacy field? What would be your 3 wishes for the advertiser in the field of cookieless?
I think 3 things we need to focus on are going to be collaboration, trust, and ethics. When I say collaboration, I mean bringing people closer together, making sure that the way we pass data in between and the way we drive insights together, that is going to take a bit of doing. You're going to need to pick your partners and work closely together. So I fully encourage everyone to collaborate. Second one is trust. Now, if you move from data for targeting to data for insights, you're not going to be able to measure on a one-to-one basis, right? You're going to have to let go of that one-to-one targeting and that one-to-one measurement. So you need to trust the value of digital. So my hope is that people actually say, well, there is some value because I know I've done the right collaboration. I know I can't measure it, so maybe I'm going to have to model it a little bit, or I'm going to have to do some panel data, whatever. But you need to trust the ecosystem to some degree. And the last one is ethics. I think ethics is very important. We need to not just do things within, TCF as our guiding principle. You actually need to look at your brand, and you need to say, what is my brand's moral compass? What is my ethics as a company and as a brand? And that is how you should apply your data strategies, not to the letter of the law, but to your own founding principles.
So I don't have additional money in my pocket, so we need to finish now, David. Sorry. We had some questions. We're going to follow up on that afterwards, I believe, right, David?
Yeah, that's correct. And no need for payment. It was time well spent. Those answers were great. And it was thank you, Thomas and panelists. It was a really enjoyable and informative session. It'd be great to hear how the TCF will work with new privacy addressable solutions and to explore what consent will look like in the post-third-party cookie era. So thank you. Now for our next session, Programmatic Creativity, and we welcome Emanuela, Director of Creative Solutions and Supply at Xaxis in EMEA. Emmanuel will lead the next panel of experts in discussion to explore how technology and data delivered via programmatic can help power creatives that resonate with audiences and new innovations that are helping advertisers deliver their creators more effectively. So without further delay, over to you, Emmanuel.
Hello, thank you, David. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Emanuela Regalcati, and I'm the Director of Creative Solution and Supply EMEA here at Xaxis. So today's panel, so first I wanted to welcome and thank you the audience. And sorry, let me start my video. Can you see me now? So today's panel is going to be all about programmatic and creativity and how we can leverage all the vast amount of data that we have and the technology that is available into the programmatic world in order to drive creative that better resonate with consumers. So before starting with the panel and before starting to ask all the questions, I wanted to remind the audience and participants that we have a chance to ask questions to the panel. So please, please input all your questions into the Q&A chat, and we will have 5 minutes towards the end to answer all of that properly. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to our wonderful panelists. And for once, I would say men first. So Vitas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Emanuela, and happy to be here. My name is Vitas, founder of Eskimi. Eskimi is a full stack ad tech platform. We have just entered Europe a few years back, more than 10 years. We've been developing ad tech business in mobile first markets in APAC and MENA. And yeah, we operate on Eskimi brand and also supply the tech with our white label solution. And definitely exciting topic to talk about. So excited to be here.
Welcome. Claire, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Claire Ritchie, Global Head of Programmatic for MediaCom. I work across all elements of programmatic to support our global community and clients across strategy, tech, planning, and people.
Welcome. Amanda.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amanda. I'm Senior Consultant for Global Programmatic Advertising at the Show Heroes Group, which is a digital tech and media group with the focus on video, which I like to highlight already because I will always refer to the video part. And for Show Heroes, to give you at least some ideas what the group is covering, we are providing an in-stream video solution, semantic technology, and a creative studio. And I'm very happy to participate on a panel which is covering like such an innovative topic.
Yes, so welcome to the panelists. So I'm going to start with one first question, and I'm going to keep it quite open. So how can programmatic technology help marketeers to deliver more relevant messaging? So maybe Amanda, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd love to. I think this is also a good question to just start off or kick off this topic. So we all know that there are quite a lot of technologies in the market already which focus, like in programmatic, obviously on the analytical side of things. But what we can see is that a real impact to have on the creativity part of things is not actually covered by the technologies yet, meaning combining the analytical approaches with the creative approaches. And that then would be actually based, if done correctly, on a data evaluation and the learning process of data. And here I also mean the data about the creative performance and what kind of influence the decision-making has on the whole approaches. And making use out of that will definitely have a huge innovative impact, but we are not there yet.
Okay, Claire, do you agree? What's your view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think programmatic is on a constant journey, constant kind of evolution. And we used to rely on standard formats, which have really limited scope for creative engagement. And this has been changing for some time now. So as the programmatic landscape has evolved, we have shorter, clearer supply chains, and bigger, more impactful formats are being traded as the norm. And I think previously this has been very difficult to scale, but there are more solutions day by day. And additionally, thinking about capitalizing on the flexibility that programmatic affords, we can bring in up-to-the-minute relevant signals, and for example, bringing the knowledge of what people are searching for, incorporating this into creative, and powered at scale through DCO, relevant audience targeting. Programmatic strength is its breadth and its position, and the bigger pool of insight from our consumers and media channels that we can take notice of, the better. And the better we can then sharpen the precision of our advertising. And we all know that the funnel is far past linear, and adapting as messaging resonates is only going to help us with driving conversion in our campaigns.
Okay, good. Good. Thank you. Vitas, what's your view? How can programmatic help advertisers and marketeers to deliver a better message?
Yeah, so I think the beauty of programmatic, I guess, is this scale of it, and I think it's very important to first acknowledge that if you put creativity on top of it, then you can engage in a personalized, segmented manner millions and millions of consumers. But so Claire mentioned about the standard formats and some of the new innovations that come in, and I would add that today the technology is already ready to really make the most of the creative, even using the same standards that we have. You have the display media units where you can, on top of them, create rich media where the engagement is up to 10 times higher than traditional display kind of simple ad units. You have gamified display ad units, again, using the same old school placements to kind of use the mobile technologies to kind of engage the users differently, creating mini games with kind of around the brand. And then like today with kind of all the metaverse concept, you have new blended in-game ad units, again, utilizing the same standards, but just innovating a bit on the placements. And at least I see that the brands are starting to adopt it. So, these are just a couple of things which the technology exists, the scale exists, then and we just need to utilize that. And I think the reward is amazing because we already see that the brands which are using that they achieve 5, 6, 10 times better engagement rates when they invest into that. Think about that prior campaign planning.
Okay. Thank you. So we know that there is a lot of potential and it's a very interesting space to be in. But what do you think are the biggest challenges when we talk about programmatic and creativity? Claire, would you like to give us your opinion from an agency perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think digital display creative anyway, can still be regarded very much as an afterthought. But it's not always afforded the time, thought, budget, for example, of TV production with its longer term timescales, an opportunity for people to collaborate and talk about, really. So I think brands that are succeeding are those that are looking at their overall creative suite as one. So supporting messaging consistency, channel relevance, planning. We are still very much in a chicken and egg situation sometimes, which comes first, activation planning or creative asset confirmation, especially when we look at the efficiency that programmatic can bring in terms of being able to buy and book a campaign very, very quickly. In an ideal world, this needs to be a connected conversation for programmatic. So how can we use the best of what the industry can offer to deliver the best campaigns for our clients? And the reality is that those in platform trading are often disconnected from creative input and decisioning. There should be a real feedback loop, a continuous feedback loop of real-time data from programmatic being used to inform future creative decisioning. But it's not the norm, but there are real pockets of good. I do want to stress that. And the other thing for me is very much tying creative success to appropriate measurement. Things like attention are becoming so much more prevalent. So how can brands measure creative execution impact on attention earned, for example, and really putting some rigor behind that?
Okay. What about Amanda? Do you agree? Do you share the same view with Claire? What are the challenges in your opinion when we talk about programmatic and creativity?
Yeah, definitely. I agree to Claire, especially or like it's kind of like the same for the video side of things. Like they are like the similar challenges we are seeing also on that side. And also the second point, which you said, Claire, about like the measurement and like how to put like measurement or like combine measurement, the right measurement with the creative. I think this is like really where we are also lacking competence and understanding, like we as the ones setting that up. Because like, first of all, we need to define like what would be the right campaign, individual metrics and KPIs to work with in order to, at the end, optimize the whole campaign. Like what is relevant for me and on what mechanism do I want to proceed on having an optimized campaign. And we cannot, like in the video point of things, like the usual KPI is like VTR, view through rate or fall through rate. And it's like mostly just, oh, I want to have like 80% at least. And then I would say my campaign is successful, but that's not deep enough anymore. And programmatic creativity would cover that we need to have more concrete insights in order to actually optimize and have like the best impact there. And this is like one of the points I really see a lack. But also on the other side, I would also say that we are missing at the moment having like the creative process and the programmatic process being like in one, being smoothly put together. So having the analytical and the creative part together. And saying that, or like with the previous question, we don't have the technology which is actually covering that right now. So there's a lot of manual work needed, and that of course like is a lot of time consuming and so on. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges, definitely, but if you can do them or like cope with them good, they can actually turn to opportunities. You're muted.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Amanda. So we see that challenges, there are challenges also from a team perspective. So creative and analytics team needs to come together and talk to each other. So we need to have that level of expertise coming into the programmatic space. Vitas, what are the challenges and what's your experience on this?
Yeah, so I think I can continue a bit on that complexity, which also Amanda a bit touched on. So like I see a really big challenge because the space is complex, that not all brands and not all clients are equally capable of executing those challenges, especially when it comes to technology, having the right tool sets, understanding the measurement the same way. And that definitely affects the results that they get. So I would say, you know, educational side of it, and a lot of platforms and you know, IAB and all the others can do a lot here to increase that awareness and reduce that technical complexity. And that would be one. I think a lot of the brands really miss out on the opportunities because of that complexity, especially with creative support now. So many screens, so many devices, and different formats. The second, I would also again touch upon on the coming from the mobile first markets where the complexity is even bigger. And we kind of, it was our surprise that they exist in Europe as well. We tend to do creatives for mobile, and we think that they all work the same. But now with the rise of heavy rich media formats, video, if you really test on all the devices and all the bandwidths, even in regional areas of any European market, you see that 40 to 50% of the users cannot really consume those creatives because they're the devices maybe have less processing power, some old Android devices, or their bandwidth doesn't support heavy video streaming and so on. So I think that's still a challenge. It is not a showstopper, I would say, because that can be solved, but it's a challenge that increases complexity, which the advertisers need to always be reminded of and think of when they are targeting their audiences. So I would add those two.
Thanks. So we had a look, and we know that there are plenty of challenges, but with challenges also there come a lot of very good opportunities in this space. And what do you think are the top opportunities in the programmatic creative space? And maybe Vitas, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So again, so just continuing on that, complexity and the need for clients to be aware. I think I can share 2 data points basically from our experiences, that if you allow clients to use the platforms, the creative builders, the programmatic ad tech platforms on their own, and without any kind of deep onboarding and help, based at least on our data, only 5% of them then eventually use those more innovative ad formats, try to ingest data into their creatives and so on, which is extremely low. But if you add that level of support and work with the clients, and of course that depends, I mean, the clients have to be willing to do so, that percentage from the campaigns having more sophisticated creatives, which then lead to better results, grows to 40%. So that's a huge, almost 10 times difference in terms of outcome, what you can achieve if you combine people with platforms. And I think there's a really good opportunity here to say we have the right tool sets, but then creativity, as in the old days of advertising, cannot be done without people, right? So I think combining the best platforms there are with people kind of bridges that gap and creates that outcome we're looking for.
Thank you. And maybe can you explain a bit more? So only a small portion of advertisers are really embracing creativity into the programmatic space based on your experience. What is the value that they perceive out of creativity?
Well, I think I mentioned that, even if we kind of compare the basic creatives, right? So traditional creatives, simple display media, because of, kind of people are kind of being bombarded with them, have the engagement rate of, below 0.5%, right? So if you look even at the simple rich media, like or a bit more complicated, maybe gamified display media formats, then you have around 6.57% average engagement rate. That's a 10x here, right? If you look at the below the funnel, naturally, a lot of those creatives with data, with the right personalization, a lot kind of help to filter out those users with intent. That again creates a lot of kind of results better. So I think the clients, I think some clients really know about that, but and they're willing to do so, but then complexity turns them off, right? So I think that's, turning this into opportunity. I would say that if we solve for complexity, then the clients would embrace it.
Thank you. And so Claire, what's your view on opportunities? Where do you see the big opportunities in this space are?
I think if we look at it from a kind of a specific programmatic perspective, unlike other media, we have that breadth of data that we've been talking about to really understand not only what's working in general, but which part of the ad is working to drive that desired outcome. How does logo positioning affect ad engagement? Does the product image moving from the left or the right drive better awareness and better recall? And I think we have that data and we can test at scale now. And this should lead to better creatives that resonate well with audiences. And savvy brands are using programmatic as not only a medium to engage with their consumers, but also the ability to test and to really, really understand those nuances and those tiny tweaks that they can make. And this is leading to bigger and better DCO strategies and better, more addressable, more personalized creative. And I think when we then bring all that together with the full wealth of what's available in the kind of the programmatic umbrella, and move away from the fact that creative is just a visual display format, take on the move audio, triggered by real-time signals, and then followed up with clear display messaging to drive engagement. That's two totally different kinds of creative, but both that are really valuable. And the more we get them right and in the better place and kind of that right sphere around them, the further they're going to travel with our consumers.
Thank you. And Amanda?
I'm actually really happy that you mentioned like the testing part about like having the programmatic creativity being there as the goal, or as, I don't know how to say that, but as the base of what we want to do. Because at the end, it's about like having experiences, like gathering the data and doing that constantly. Like I like the examples which you said, like about like just switching the logo from left to right. Those are like tiny things what can be done, and then at the end it will have an impact on the campaign's performance. And playing around with that, like constantly having experiences, always like checking the data, that will like actually affect like relevance in the campaign. And for the brand, it means like a higher brand awareness, of course, or like a higher return on investment. So the campaign goals can definitely like increase and be optimized when doing the approach right. Like when going back, like you can always like always argue in about it. Those are challenges because it's not easy. As Vitas also said, it's complex. This all is complex. Programmatic advertising is already complex, and then we want to like combine it with creativity. That's like next level. So this is not easy, but if done right, then it can really be an opportunity for sure.
Good. Thank you so much, Amanda. So I know that we're already running out of time, but we started a bit late. So I'm going to take a couple of extra minutes at the end. Just a very quick question around innovation. So we see a lot of innovation every day in the programmatic space. What have you seen any innovation lately, or any good formats that caught your eye? Maybe Claire, you can start.
I mean, there's so much going on and so much changing all the time. I think where we're being really clever as an industry at the moment is our use of DCO, already together, kind of relevant in the moment signals with the right creative, and now really looking at that kind of test and learn exposure to how contextual targeting is affecting that sphere, so that we're privacy ready, etc. But I think there's been some really great examples of campaigns recently with voice activated ads that are really innovative, because they are about tweaking that creative that's in the moment for the right opportunity, but also giving us an opportunity to allow consumers to purchase against their ads as well.
Vitas, anything from your end? Any good creative?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing again mostly on the mobile space is the gamified ads, again utilizing the same positions but trying to innovate on them. And I think you're just sharing a couple of like results. I think engagement rate is one, But I think Claire mentioned also the kind of the attention and how we can measure that. And I think it's like some brands have started to use those gamified ads and trying to measure how many seconds of gameplay you accumulate, and that's definitely drives top of mind awareness and engagement with the brand. So from some of the campaigns we've seen that that gameplay within the ad unit, it goes up to like 20-25 seconds. And then when you multiply that by a couple of million users that you reach, you have like a lot of combined gameplay with very clearly with brand within this ad and brand with brand engagement. So I think that's what we're seeing, and it's not a new format. Again, using the mobile technologies and gyroscopes and all those things to engage, but if you create it as a game, invite users, create like leader scores and so on, that increases that engagement level and results in a very deep gameplay time as a total. So kind of that's, I think, what we like seeing now.
Thank you. So we have a question from the audience, and I think this is going to be our last question as we are running out of time. But in terms of innovation, do you see programmatic out of home as an opportunity to bridge creativity, especially from mobile, as the aspect ratios are very aligned? But so is programmatic out of home something you're considering? Maybe does anybody in the panel want to answer this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are, of course, considering out of home, especially as it becomes more programmatically enabled. It should be considered as part and parcel of what we can do programmatically. Again, as we've seen with lots of different things, as they've taken their kind of programmatic evolution, we need to be looking at the opportunity as a whole rather than piecemeal. We need to be planning for the breadth of what we can do rather than something here, something here, something here. And I think we're starting to see some really interesting opportunities, both with the kind of targeting that we can do in terms of relevance, but also bringing lots of different formats of campaigns together and the crossover between different channels. I'm not sure if anyone's seen it, but Oatly's recent Meta ad that they released poked a little bit of fun at using lots of different mediums, and ultimately they created a social media poster, a one-time Instagram post, but it was about originally a bus stop ad, which became a billboard ad, which became a boat ad, and you could see all the different iterations of this. And I think that whilst that's not necessarily, an articulation of programmatic out of home, it should be giving us the food for thought that we should be and are, where we can, connecting all of these dots, and that ultimately we should be planning for best practice in our media rather than specifically audio out of home, etc., etc., etc.
Thank you, Claire. I think we are now coming to the end of our panel. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you, our wonderful panelists, and for the great conversation. And I'm personally very excited about what programmatic and creativity will look like and in the future. So a lot of very interesting new formats and a lot of different data that can be applied in order to drive best in class creative execution. So thank you everyone, and thank you to the audience as well for taking the time and the great questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Emanuela, and panelists. It's wonderful to hear about all the creative innovations happening in the programmatic space and what the industry can do to help advance this. So thank you again. Now for our final session of the day. I can't believe we're there now. And this one's a really interesting one, and probably the one I've been looking forward to most, because it's about buzzwords, and we do love buzzwords in our industry. So with regards to buzzwords, or at least tackling 2022 buzzwords, Sarah Vincent, Senior Director of Strategic Partner Development at Index Exchange, will lead this panel of experts as they explore the big themes coming up for the programmatic industry. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, David. Can you give us a wave where you can hear me? Yep, all good. Perfect. So thank you I'm glad this is the last panel that you'll be looking forward to all day, David, and hopefully that's the case with the audience. So first of all, thank you so much to the IAB Europe for enabling me to moderate this session. I'm excited to be here, and we have a great panel lined up to talk through buzzwords that reflect 21 so far and what we're all excited about, and we expect the industry will be talking about next year into 22. So to kick off with, we are midway through Q4 already in 21. I really don't know how we've got here, but with 6 weeks left to go of the year, I'm keen to hear from each of you panelists about how you think 21 can be surmised in either one word or one phrase. And if we can start off and introduce yourself before you give your answer, that would be great. Let's kick off with you, Christoph.
Hi, so my name is Krzysztof Lis. I work at Yieldbird. We try to help the publishers to make the most money out of the inventory that they are selling programmatically. I worked on the buy side, I sold programmatic deals, and right now I'm in charge of contacting the tech providers for Yieldbird. So I would say that since 2020 was the year of pandemic, that 2021 was the year when we tried to build the sustainable models around the whole pandemic, with all the issues caused by the COVID in mind, like the supply chain disruptions and everything that caused so huge shifts on the market. So if I would also say what happened in 2021 in one sentence, we just tried to rebuild our online businesses in the new reality.
Yeah, I think that you speak for everyone when you say that, and I think we'll come to this later in the panel, actually, I'm sure, but just about how some of those systems have changed, how we've rebuilt the world into this new normal. Charlotte, what about you?
Hi, I'm Charlotte from Sybids. I think for me, buzzword of 2021 would be measurement. We've seen, obviously, at the start of the pandemic, spends and investment into media budgets be cut due to that type of uncertainty. But now looking into 2021, we've seen programmatic channels thrive. We're all doing this balance of working from home, being in the office, and whilst we're doing that, we're doing it more digitally. So we're using more devices, and from that comes more data points, which marketers can use in campaigns to target their target audience. But also now we need to work out how to make sense of it. And I think that's why we've seen measurement in programmatic be so important this year, because as a channel, programmatic is measurable. The impact of that channel is understandable, and the spend that's going into it is all accountable. So for me, yeah, measurement would be the 2021 buzzword.
I love that. That's a great word. It also is that you've outlined there just the agility that we have in this industry, and what we saw, how we pivoted, and what programmatic enables in that space is super exciting. That makes a lot of sense. Filippo, over to you.
Hello, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Filippo Gramigna. I'm the CEO of Audience Rate, who is an identity hub. Basically, we help data owners to onboard, manage, and activate data at scale, preparing for the launch of a new breed of CDP, which will come to life next year. So obviously, data for me and for us is a focus, and we've been hearing throughout the old panels about the cookie deprecations, and obviously the delay of this deprecation within the Chrome environment has been the big topic for the whole industry, which I think is it has given oxygen to the whole players, because this is definitely a very complex thing to solve. But I think it's the very positive thing about this delay is that we have more room to test more solutions, to learn more on how to deploy those solutions and how to make the new infrastructure work for the best of the ecosystem. So the buzzword is delay, but this is not a negative one. It actually is a positive one, because it helps everyone to make things right.
Right, thank you. A challenge is always an opportunity, like that. Amina.
Some great words so far. Hi, I'm Amina. I'm Director of Solutions Consulting at Xandr. So for me, privacy has been the buzzword for 2021, whether it's privacy-centric or privacy-first or privacy-safe. We've really seen businesses in ad tech really come to the realization that privacy shouldn't be treated as an add-on or a business trend. It really needs to be baked into the DNA and heart of decisions that we make. And I think this really stems from the fact that programmatic as an industry has been shifting a while towards more of a consumer-first mindset, where the consumer needs and their experiences are really front and center of what we do.
I think like customer centric is the the core of everything you're saying there, and very much the focus for this year and ongoing. Thank you very much, guys. Nice to meet you and for your initial responses. Now moving into 22, I think everything that you've talked about today encapsulating 21 will, I'm sure, continue to evolve into next year, but I'm keen to see like how you see that evolving. So again, in fact, so I'll come back to you, Amina, on for your answer on what you see is going to be like the most talked about and the thing that we should really be focusing on for 22.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're talking about 22 already. Really great question. I'll sort of break it down into two parts. So it is a bit of a cliche, but going into next year, privacy will continue to be a high-level theme. And the reason for that is we are nowhere near the end game in terms of what identity solutions or combination of solutions are going to prevail. And we need them to work for the ecosystem, but also for the consumer. So we're still at a stage where there's so much testing and development that really needs to be done, whether it's with the browser solutions or with the industry IDs as examples. And all of this is happening in the backdrop of constant continuing regulatory changes, meaning that we are going to continue to see fragmentation in the industry. So this is why at Xandr we think that marketplaces will be a buzzword in 2022. It's not a new concept and it's super simple by definition. It's simply just a place for buyers and sellers to come together. But where we see the innovation is how marketplaces are going to be applied going forward. So for example, buyers and sellers coming together to create a privacy safe curated marketplace, or publishers creating a first-party data marketplace like Schibsted, for example, have done. And the thing with marketplaces is the great thing is it gives buyers choice, always a good thing. It gives sellers control, and ultimately it gives consumers puts consumers first and foremost, and is done with privacy ingrained.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioning regulation, you can't avoid not talking about regulation, but it does really very much frame now obviously how we need to adapt to the industry, but also how users also interpret what we do in our space. And I know that regulation has definitely informed, awareness of that has helped inform them in their trust of the space. And so again, putting them first makes sense. Filippo, what about you? Do you agree with Amina? Something else to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that all these technicalities of cookies, which is actually a very specific thing, has made all the actors understand how much data is important for the whole programmatic and the marketing campaigns. And in particular, on one side, I think publishers and brands have started to understand that they need to act now, not only to deploy and understand the new identity solutions, but to start collecting the right consent and to collect the first-party data, because this is their central asset for the future. Obviously, not all the brands and publishers will be able to have data at scale. So what the guy at Starcom, Jacques, I think his name was really important. What he mentioned is that the cooperation across the industry, because the first party data play is definitely important, but even more important is the second party data play for all the players involved in the industry to really start to have an easy way to cooperate and to make the data be accessible at scale. On the other side, I think, as we already listened before, the users will be more and more at the center of these two pieces of the spectrum. But as the Gartner said in a recent research, by 2023, I think it was 65% and even more of the connected population will be covered under privacy regulations. So the users are now starting really to understand what does it mean a cookie, what does it mean to give consent or not give consent. So I think it's really important that whomever collects data and consent gives a clear message of what this consent is for and how the data will be used, so that the value exchange between the final user the brands and the publisher remains consistent across the next years.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Christoph?
Well, I would say that 2022 is going to be about finding the alternative to the third-party cookies. And I fully agree with what Filippo and Amina just said. We need to find the right solution that's going to help the buyers get the same result out of their campaign without the use of third-party cookies. And on the other hand, it needs to be fully user-centric. We must make users feel safe. We must help them understand what's actually what the data we are gathering, what we are doing with it. And we need to explain to them that if they don't give us the consent to store some data about them, to learn about their behaviors, it's not that they are not going to get any ads at all, right? They will still get the same amount of ads, but the ads will be poor targeted and not interesting, and we all want to avoid it. So we keep getting those questions from the publishers that we work with. What should we do now? What's the alternative? And well, I would say that 2021 also made us worry about the monopolies, because one party single-handedly, unilaterally affected the whole ecosystem, the whole market, by simply postponing the phase out of third-party cookies. And it made some of the businesses that tried to build some alternative solutions like unified IDs, they were rendered irrelevant for at least a couple of months. So the only thing that we know at this point is that the publishers need to put some effort to gather their own data if they have it, and if they don't have it, they need to devise a way to, for example, guesstimate what the users or the audience is interested in by analyzing what they are reading, right? So we need to find the right solution for the third-party cookies that are going away, but we don't know what's going to happen, and the alternatives are not there yet. So I would say that this is going to consume most of the 2022, at least from our perspective.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a bit more from your perspective. Obviously, you work with a number of publishers, so you get that, presumably that question comes up a lot. And your response is, I mean, what is your response? Is it?
Well, basically, at this point, I believe that the market has no clear winner in terms of what's going to be used instead of third-party cookies. So the only thing that we can advise, and we should advise the publisher, is to try to get their own data, even if eventually they will not be using it, because gathering a significant amount of data to create right helpful user profiles takes time, right? So it's something that they need to be doing now, even if they don't know how to do it, or they don't know how to sell it, how to capitalize on the data. Because what can happen is that we might come to the point in time when we don't have those cookies available anymore, and the publishers don't have anything to help the buyers target the ads properly. So this is the worst outcome that we can get from this process.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very much an education, and it's advising as best you can, I guess. But it's also, you know, for publishers to start taking those actions of collecting that data in preparation as well. And I think, first, to your point, Filippo, like first party, second party, also really, really important. Charlotte, what about you?
I think for me, the same buzzword as 2021, measurement, but going into 2022, we're going to see measurement take on a whole new meaning when it's going to have all new challenges. And certainly from what we're seeing at Scibids is that brands are wanting KPIs and measurements that reflect more of their true business outcomes. So going beyond just clicks or a metric that's previously been used, and building out more customizable metrics and KPIs. We're seeing this in CPG brands where they're wanting a quality CPM, so blending several branding KPIs and using custom formulas to model brand lift for them, and looking at attention, all these kind of metrics that have come out of there, which we now need to measure. And we're seeing this shift in the market, and then you combine that with the increase in our digital footprints, and yeah, there's a lot more data out there. And I think that's where measurement plays a big role next year. And the challenge there is, how do we make sense of that? And I think that's where we see tech like AI playing a very large role next year as well.
That's super interesting, especially you mentioned attention there. I know a previous panel talked about that, but is that now something that's coming up more and more in your conversations? And is there like a route towards defining what that actually is? I feel like that's a buzzword, but I'm not sure if it's been fully defined yet. So I'm keen to know if you have a vision on that.
Yeah, I think definitely it's more and more conversations that we're having. We're certainly seeing brands trying to find what it is for them. and using partners which are going into it and trying to work out, what is it? I think it's all about what's the outcome that you're trying to reach and how do you define that for a brand? And I think for lots of brands, that's actually unique to them. I think that's where we're getting this customizable approach, which is so important. So even just defining it as like a metric in itself comes with lots of sub definitions, because I think it means something different to each brand, and that in itself is one of the main challenges for next year. How do we measure it? How do we optimize towards it? And yeah, how do we prove that and make it make sense for the business?
Yeah, that's interesting. Every brand has their own ideas.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you so much. So moving on to what about emerging technologies next year? What do we think here where we'll see sort of biggest technological advances for emerging channels? Filippo, sorry, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think that there will be definitely new emerging technologies, but I think there might be also new breeds of existing technologies, because I think what I see in the industry right now is finally two galaxies that were running in parallel. So the ad tech galaxy and the marketing and technology galaxy, which were kind of disconnected before or not so well connected, that are coming closer and closer right now, because obviously at the end of the day, CMOs and marketeers on one side and publishers on the other side are starting to really understand how important it is to connect all their existing stack in the most seamless way in order to really take advantage in an efficient way about the technologies. So I think there will be a lot of DMPs either going out of the market or changing into CDPs. The importance of clean rooms is definitely a huge component, as we heard before. At the end of the day, it's going to be, there will be channels increasing in spend, as we heard before, video and CTV. But on the other side, I think data will probably become, instead of being what has been so far, almost like a residual part of the targeting campaigns, it will become the first component to think of, because the quality part of the data becomes central at this stage. Data is a kind of an abstract and very generic term, but behind the data, there is a user, right? And the knowledge of the user means that you can actually start to have the right setting of the campaign and really have the proper way of communicating your product and services to the user. So I think the real opportunity really is to have a better understanding of your customer base, and by doing so, connecting the right technologies to achieve your goals.
Yeah, so better data management, which almost becomes a channel, but the beginning part of that process. So it's like a rethinking. Yeah. To say data is a big word. And
exactly. And also I think the other important factor that I think it's worth mentioning is that tools needs to become more easy to use, because most of the tools that are around data management right now are either too complex to use, to deploy, or too expensive. Data management needs to become something very commoditized in the future, something that people understand how to use in a very easy way, as we do when we deploy a plugin in our browser. So it's a click away, and then everything starts to come together in the most nice and easy way to activate later on.
So data is table stakes, and then everything else on top. I saw some heads nodding there. Amina, do you agree with that? Do you have anything else to add? And what else do you see as emerging next year?
Yeah, I think Filippo made some really great points, especially around like the connection of technologies. And I think he was very much alluding to simplification. And I think when we think about channels next year, we really think about omnichannel buying. So things like digital video will continue to be prominent. And we know that we have users there and we have to meet those users. We know that it's tricky because adoption outside of the US is super hard. So how does that work? It's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. I think, we've got the whole of next year to get it right, but it's also a fragmented area as well. But I think what we will see is potentially partnerships emerging where, you can go there to get the format breadth, the transparency, the efficient access to the omnichannel supply.
Yeah, omni, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it does encompass so many different elements as well. And it's all like super exciting, some is nascent, some is not so much. You know, we all know that we are seeing, you know, plateauing of display spend, and so we have to be looking at this diversification, and you know, that's really super exciting for everybody involved. You know, as tech partners, as publishers, and as buyers. So yeah, 100% agree that we're only going to see more growth in that space. Charlotte, did you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I think for me, I touched upon it briefly in my last answer, but AI, I think it's going to be one of the biggest tech advancements for next year. It's going to impact all channels. I mean, it's out there now and it's evolving, but it still hasn't reached the peak. And when I'm talking about AI and programmatic, I'm talking about a sophisticated, privacy-respecting AI that can deliver custom algorithms to address lots of the issues that we've already spoke about. I think, you know, two that stick out there are privacy and transparency. So having advertisers, having traders able to access in real time their bidding scripts in their DSP, it's going to provide them with that transparency. They're going to be able to pull real-time insights into the decision making, into, you know, what's going on in the campaign, and there's not going to be this black box around what's going on, what the optimizations made. It's all going to be at hand. And I think, yeah, that next year we're going to see that the growth of that grow amazingly. Yeah.
Yes, that sounds really exciting. But if we're talking about 12 months, as in next year, we know 12 months in ad tech can be either go super quickly or actually take a long, long time. So do you think that the bulk of what you're saying will be realized next year, or it's very much it's a starting point, it's an adoption, and it will obviously be in a better place this time next year, but we've still got a long way to go?
No, I think it's a realistic deadline. Like, it's already being used. We use it with our clients. You know, we develop this turnkey solution that's already in the DSP to use privacy respecting AI. So, you know, the fundamentals of it are there. The adoption we're certainly seeing is growing of it. And it's just about how that changes next year. So making sure that's in line with the new measurement tools and attribution tools. But in terms of, it's already out there. So I think next year will be about how do we grow it? How do we use it in a more complicated manner, which aligns more with brands' needs? But yeah, certainly, I think actually, you know, we've got it in 2021. It's just what can we do with it in 2022?
So scaling it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you very much. So moving on to thinking about the value chain, what are the parts of that value chain or elements that contribute towards it that you think may see the most and perhaps the least amount of change for next year? Philip, I'll kick off with you.
Yeah, I think also here the interesting trend is the consolidation on one side of the platforms. Definitely on the buy side and supply side, we have seen in the last probably 5 years more and more consolidation. So probably less players with bigger scale that are giving the right solutions to brands and publishers. On the other side, I think there is an opportunity for more partnership and cooperation. I always insist on that because if on one side we have very few big players which are eating the majority of the cake that we have in front of us, definitely there is an opportunity for the smaller players, independent players, to really take more action and to cooperate more. So, and this could be in different ways. It could be via partnerships, it could be via M&As, it could be via different type of consolidation of and more connected technologies altogether. Because if on one side there is complexity, and I heard in the beginning of this day that there will be even more complexity, even more solutions out there in the market, which frightens me a little bit because there are already many companies and solutions out there. But this complexity doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be in front of the people and the teams who needs to activate those platforms. So the platforms need to connect behind the scenes in the most seamless way, and then on the front end, the people and the marketeers who need to use those platforms do not have to see necessarily the complexity behind it, as we have on an engine of a car, right? So we don't know all the complexity within the car, but we use the car in a very easy way. So that should be the same thing for programmatic. It has to be one console that manages different solutions behind the scenes, and this becomes the real opportunity for all of us to cooperate more closely to each other.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's complicated now. It will get more complicated, as you said. I guess it's as an industry, it's for us to figure out how we can best present that to, you know, every player and every partner that's involved in that value chain, to make it seamless. I guess part of that is actually testing though, and, you know, understanding where there won't be one outright winner for each like element we're trying to solve, but like, going through that process is really important. It's something, Amina, I think you mentioned earlier. Do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think I'd really just echo a lot of what Filippo has just said. I think when we talk about collaborations, like there have been some great examples in the last year. Just thinking out loud, the Danish publisher platform is a great example of publishers coming together to kind of come up with an alternative to buying efficiently and at scale in the Danish market. I think Filippo kind of also mentioned and alluded to the fact that it terrified him, but all of the new sort of ad tech providers or vendors coming into existence in the last year. And I think the good thing there is it's an opportunity for really buyers to differentiate, because there are so many different players that they can now work with. But, you know, all of these new tech vendors need to be tested. And I think there's going to be a really exciting time where we kind of get to reset. Buyers suddenly get a lot of choice because there's a lot out there, but in order to kind of see that come to realization, they do need to test a lot of these partners and see what works for them.
Do you agree with that, Christoph?
Oh yes, I fully agree with what Amina and Filippo just said, because I hope to see more cooperation. I would say cooperation fueled by the competition between different parties. What I'm afraid is that the publishers, just like Filippo mentioned, are going to be to rely on a single huge business partner or tech provider, that if it stops working for some reason, it causes huge disruptions in the whole business, right? We are always told not to keep all the eggs in a single basket, but on the other hand, we should not get all the eggs from a single egg-laying hen that can always tell us, I'm not laying any more eggs for you, or I have some technical issues and I'm not going to do it in the next 7 days. So if that's the case for a publisher who works with one tech provider or one demand provider, as we like to think of them, they stop making any money for a significant amount of time. So, well, I hope that eventually we have a handful of strong partners, of strong tech providers that can work on a level playing field, maybe using some transparent open source solutions like the Prebit library is a great example of something that can facilitate that. If we eventually all understand how to use those open source technologies, open source solutions to integrate different technologies, it will be very helpful, because the publisher is always in a better place when they can work with a single party that connects with 3 other tech providers than to have 4 agreements with 4 different parties and incorporate them into one single stack using their own technical team, right? It takes more time and effort for the publishers, and we all like to spend as little time on developing new things as possible.
Yeah, so I think it's you know, very resounding consolidation, collaboration. I think it's like a clear like recognition of who the competition is, and you know, then we're seeing individual players that used to perhaps exist as islands coming together to form that collaboration, to build their own.
Yeah, sure. Just what Amina mentioned, right? The Danish publishers are working together even though they're competing with each other. So we need to find a way to compete with each other where the competition is necessary, but also cooperate when it's possible and where it's beneficial for all the parties involved.
Yeah, makes sense. Time is whizzing on, so I've got 2 more questions to ask you. What would you see as some of the biggest challenge areas for 2022? If you're going to sum those up into phrases and buzzwords, where do you think the challenges exist? Christoph, do you want to kick off?
Well, I hope that all the players in the market are eventually going to be more cooperative one with each other, and I basically have no idea how to make it happen. The bigger players have the position that they might stop the changes on the market itself, which is something that we don't expect. We wouldn't want to happen, but what I think might eventually be the case is that smaller players, by working with each other, might put enough pressure on the market to facilitate the changes that are needed, or to stop the changes that we don't want to have, like well, nothing comes to my mind at this point, but even in case of a new laws being introduced, right? If the market is very constituted of a significant number of small partners, then having a single solution, single answer to a new law being proposed is difficult. It's always easier and better if we can work with each other under the IAB, for example, right? To come up with one solution, one idea to tackle these changes.
Yeah, so is a great opportunity, but obviously it's a challenge to see how you actually execute that and make it work for you. Amina, what about you? What do you see as a big challenge?
So I think uncertainty will continue to be a challenge, but when is it not? We don't know what's coming around the corner in terms of regulatory changes. You know, I'm sure we've spent a lot of time today talking about the deprecation of the third-party cookie, but really, when will that happen? And can it really happen without alternative solutions having been tested? And with all of this uncertainty, like I mentioned, comes fragmentation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that again leads to choice. And it gives buyers the opportunity to sort of differentiate from competitors. So I think if I had to sum things up, I would say uncertainty, but that could be for any year, really.
Yeah, it just depends on what's sitting underneath that label. Filippo, Charlotte, anything to add on what you see as a challenge?
I would go back again to identity. Solving identity is definitely the biggest one that I see for next year, which involves all players in the ecosystem. So understanding, mapping all the identity solutions. Obviously, there is a proliferation of different solutions. Not all of them will continue to exist, probably in 2 years' time. So, and the scale of those solutions might come with some pros and cons for each player. So I think really understanding why to use one, the learning of the use of one solution versus another one is probably the biggest challenge that everyone has right now. But there are already solutions in the market that are mapping those solutions on behalf of the publishers, for example, or on behalf of the brands. So really also understanding who can simplify and increase the speed of the test and learn process that everyone is involved in. I think it's probably then another important factor.
Makes sense. Charlotte, anything to add?
No, I think we've covered all of them, talking about identity and uncertainty. Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a very busy year next year.
It does. I'm just getting a flag from the IAB. So just to finish up, what about the biggest opportunities next year? We've talked about many things. If you would sum up in like one word, one phrase, what is the opportunity from your point of view for next year? Charlotte?
Yeah, so not to sound like a broken record here, but yeah, for me it would be AI having that competitive edge and being customizable with it.
Fantastic. Amina?
Again, talking about marketplaces, I think we saw a really successful launch at the beginning of November with Schibsted's first-party data marketplace. I think I'm excited to see what other publishers are going to do with their first-party data and to see how buyers can integrate that into their buying strategies.
So, Filippo?
Just not to repeat myself again around data, I think what I would really love to see, but I don't sure that I will see next year, is a more easy way to connect platforms to each other. So instead of all the politics that sometimes is involved in the way you can partner with another platform, another player, I think a much more easy and distributed way to connect to each other. I think it would be a great opportunity for all players involved in the ecosystem.
And finally, Christoph?
Well, I'm very excited about the third-party cookies alternatives, and I'm honestly very cautious and interested what's going to happen with that issue this year.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. I know obviously it's anything that's a challenge is also an opportunity, so it's good to hear that everyone's thinking about the same things. And thank you for your time. Thanks to the IAB for having us. It's been great, and it's gone so quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and to all panelists. I want to echo a couple of the buzzwords Jacques, Filippo, and many more other panelists mentioned today, which was collaboration and cooperation. As without these, we will not drive our industry to new heights. And as Sarah said, I have no idea where the time has gone, but we're almost at the end of the 2021 H2 Virtual Programmatic Day. And what an event it's been. We've had around 400 attendees tuning in. And, oh, sorry, Oh yeah, there you go. My screen was just went a bit funny there. We had 400 attendees tuning into this event, which is just incredible. I want to thank our sponsors for today's event, OneTrust. We would not be able to put these events on without your valuable support, so thank you. And I'd like to thank all our panelists, moderators, for giving their time, sharing their knowledge and views on the important topics that were discussed and debated today. I'm sure many of our attendees will have taken an idea or more away with them that could be used to improve their own business. I'd like to thank Lauren Wakefield, Marie-Claire, and Georgia Cook from IAB Europe for putting together and delivering yet another very successful Virtual Programmatic Day. And the event recording will be available on IAB Europe's website over the next few days. IAB Europe has lots of other resources related to programmatic, from white papers to guides to one-on-one videos, so check out the Knowledge Hub at iabeurope.eu. The next Virtual Programmatic Day will take place in May next year, so be sure to keep your eye out for more information early 2022. And if you enjoyed this event, well, you're in luck, because IAB Europe have more events before the end of the year that you may want to join. Firstly, the introduction to in-gaming on the 25th of November, which follows from the recently published, I believe today, IAB Europe's in-game guide. Daniel Knapp, who you saw earlier on today, will also be back with Economic Trends Forum on the 30th of November, in which he will share his key trends and expected industry developments, including growth area predictions for 2022. And you can also find more about and register for both these events on IAB Europe's website. Head to the events section for that. And we will also be back in 2022 with all of our great flagship events, as I said, like the VPD in May, but be sure to stay tuned for details on all of those. As mentioned at the beginning of the event, all our speakers are from IAB Europe's member companies. So if you'd like to find out more about membership, please contact Lauren or Marie-Claire. Details are on screen. And finally, thank you to all of you, the attendees, for tuning in. Without your support and interest, we wouldn't have a Virtual Programmatic Day. So thank you one last time and enjoy the rest of your day.